Chapter 502. From Shenzhen to Hong Kong. I traveled along the western passage of Shenzhen, Hong Kong. After 2 hours, I returned to the Mi family's manor. Since it was still daytime, Mi Ding-chung wasn't home. I asked the driver to inform him and returned to my room. I wanted to pour my witchcraft energy into the Qingzhou cauldron as soon as possible. Liang Tianxin had told me that we would depart in 7 days. Counting the time, 5 days had already passed. In the next 2 days, I had to work overtime to fill the Qingzhou cauldron with witchcraft energy. So, I didn't plan on going out for the next 2 days. However, when I returned to my room, I frowned. Fox Lady Yao Yao wasn't in the room, and neither was the snake spirit. Did Mi Ding-chung arrange for them to stay in another room? I closed my eyes and extended my spirit sense. I quickly searched the entire manor, but I didn't find any trace of them. I couldn't help but feel slightly anxious. When I left, I had specifically told them not to go out. Now that there was no trace of them, it couldn't be that something had happened to them, right? I hesitated for a while, but I didn't go out to look for them. After all, the spirit snake had the power of a heavenly master. Fox girl Yao Yao was slightly weaker, but she also had the cultivation of Shi Yao. With their strength, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they could do whatever they wanted in Hong Kong. Even if they got into trouble, they had the ability to protect themselves. I didn't need to worry too much. With that thought, I sat down and put their matter aside. I took out the Qingzhou cauldron and began to pour my witchcraft energy into it. Time flew while I was cultivating. After pouring my witchcraft energy into the cauldron twice, it was getting late. I felt a little tired, so I stopped. I got up and stretched my body. I wanted to rest for a while. There was still no news of the snake spirit and Yao Yao. I felt restless. As I was thinking about going out to ask someone, I sensed the snake spirit's aura outside the Mi family's manor. I walked out of my room and went to the outside of the villa. I saw the snake spirit and Yao Yao coming from afar. Mi Ding-chung and a few other unfamiliar faces were with them. Seeing me, Yao Yao, who was silently following behind, everyone suddenly showed an expression of surprise. She ran over from afar and seemed to want to say something to me, but I don't know if it was because she was too excited that she stuttered or because she was shy. She opened her mouth and in the end only called out "Gidge" and then hid behind me. I smiled faintly. This little fellow was still so shy. However, seeing that she could follow the spirit snake and the others out, she had improved from before. Soon, everyone walked in front of me. Compared to Yao Yao, the spirit snake was much more carefree. She chuckled and patted my shoulder. "Didn't you say 2 or 3 days? What took you so long?" I knew his personality, so I didn't mind his actions. I slapped his hand away and ignored him. I turned to Mi Ding-chung and asked, "Where is Eldami taking them?" Before Mi Ding-chung could reply, a young man with a jade-like face standing at the side spoke first. "You must be Master Zhou Yi, right? I've heard my father and Master Long mention you these past few days, and I've been looking forward to meeting you. My wish has finally come true today." "My father? Lord Long?" I was stunned for a moment before I reacted. This rich young master in front of me should be the son of Medding City. As for that so-called Lord Long, it was probably a name given by the spirit snake. I didn't find it strange at all. However, Mi Ding-chung's son was quite fluent in Mandarin, which was rare. I nodded indifferently as a form of greeting. My expression was cold, but it didn't affect the man's enthusiasm. He said warmly, "I've been busy with work these past few days, so I didn't get to see Master Zhou excavate our Mi family's ancestral grave. I've heard my father talk about the situation at that time, and I really admire him." It was the first time he had met me, but Mi Ding-chung was familiar with me. He knew that I had a cold temperament, so he interrupted with a smile. "Although my son is young, he's very interested in metaphysics. He's excited to meet Master Zhou. Please don't blame him." As for Miss Yao Yao and Master Long, they just went out for a walk and ate some of Hong Kong's specialties. My expression softened and I nodded. So that's how it is. Since they've been eating for a whole day, I don't think they need to eat dinner. I'll bring them back first. Then, I didn't bother with the father and son. I called the spirit snake and Yao Yao to return to my room. The spirit snake didn't seem to want to go. He said that he wanted to watch a dance or something, but I slapped him on the head. Then, He calmed down and followed me with a reluctant face. After we returned to my room, I asked them what they had been doing while I was gone. The spirit snake told me that after I left, they stayed in the room, eating, sleeping, and watching TV. The next day, Mi Dingqing's son, Mi Tai, the young man who had been pestering me, suddenly came back. He was different from Mi Dingcheng, who believed in metaphysics. His son was a materialist, and he didn't believe in ghosts or spirits. I guess that Mi Dingcheng had heard about what had happened in the past few days, so he said that we were all liars and wanted to confront us. Mi Dingcheng couldn't stop him, so he barged into the room and met the spirit snake and Yao Yao. If I had been there, I wouldn't have paid attention to such a person. I would have just punished him and thrown him out. Unfortunately, he met the spirit snake. At that time, this fellow was feeling bored. When he met Mi Tai, he immediately became playful and used all kinds of spells. He was so scared that he was completely dumbfounded. In the end, he no longer mentioned his previous doubts and turned to worship the serpent spirit. The spirit snake was a master who relied on flattery. He had been bullied by Tong Tong and I for so many years. At this moment, when he heard Mi Tai's flattery, he was so happy that he became happy and played with him. In the following days, Mi Tai brought him everywhere to play. Not only did he go out, but he also brought Yao Yao. The spirit snake looked embarrassed. These days, I've promised to teach Mi Tai some cultivation techniques. However, he's a flood dragon, so his cultivation technique is different from a human's. That's why he wants me to pick some cultivation techniques to teach Mi Tai. Mi Tai didn't care about Yao Yao at first. However, after the spirit snake told him that Yao Yao's cultivation base wasn't low, he started to flatter her. The little girl was shy, so she couldn't bear it. Reluctantly, she went out with them to have fun. I couldn't help but sneer. This Mi Tai was interesting. I had heard from Mi Ding City that he had 2 sons who worked in the government. Mi Tai should be one of them. This man was worthy of being a government official. He was smart and cunning. Seeing that the spirit snake and Yao Yao were innocent, he tried to coax them. He had almost cheated them of their cultivation techniques. The spirit snake was careless. Mi Tai could hide his thoughts from him, but he couldn't hide it from me. Hong Kong was full of metaphysics. Mi Tai was born in the Mi family, a family that relied on metaphysics. How could he not believe in metaphysics? Most likely, he was just acting. He wanted to use this method to get close to the spirit snake, or me. It wasn't a big mistake. It was just that his method was annoying. If he had come to me openly, I would have given him some pointers as long as he had the talent to cultivate, considering his relationship with Mi Ding City. However, he wanted to use this method. Moreover, he wanted to target the innocent spirit snake and Yao Yao. From this, it could be seen that he didn't have a good heart. No matter how talented he was, I wouldn't care about him. After I understood the reason, I didn't ask anymore. I took the black evil seal from the spirit snake's body and sent him back to the ink dragon on my back. I rested for a while before continuing to pour my shaman energy into the Qingzhou cauldron. For the next day and night, besides eating, I focused on the Qingzhou cauldron. Finally, on the evening of the second day, I filled the Qingzhou cauldron with shaman energy. After that, I told Yao Yao to go to another room. Then, I closed the door and carefully took out the Xian Yuan sword case. I wanted to try again. I wanted to see if the Qingzhou cauldron, which was filled with shaman energy, could activate the sword case again. Today was the 7th day since I had promised to meet Liang Tianxin. There was only one night left. Of course, I didn't have time to replenish the Qingzhou cauldron with shaman energy. However, compared to my promise with Liang Tianxin, activating the Xian Yuan sword case was much more important. As long as I could activate the sword case again, it wouldn't matter even if I turned against Liang Tianxin tomorrow. With my current cultivation, I didn't care about him and the hunchback old man. After making up my mind, I carefully placed the Xian Yuan sword's case against the night sky outside the window. Then, I placed the Qingzhou cauldron on top of the case and quickly hid to the side. I held my breath and focused. Time ticked by. After half a minute, there was still no movement from the Xian Yuan sword's case. I sighed helplessly. Last time, when the Qingzhou cauldron had just been placed in Xiang Lu's leather bag, the Xian Yuan sword case had shot out a sword light. This time, half a minute had passed. It was obvious that there was no effect. It seemed that the small cauldron filled with shaman energy could only activate the sword case once. It couldn't be activated multiple times. Now, I could only hope that the other small cauldrons could also activate the sword case. Although I was slightly disappointed, I wasn't discouraged. I tried to activate the sword case, and each time, it consumed half of the Dao Qi in my body. If I activated the sword case again, the power of the sword light that shot out would naturally increase, but the Dao Qi consumed would also increase. I reckoned that I would soon reach my limit. From this, it seemed that the other 5 small cauldrons were enough. I didn't need to place my hopes on activating the sword case again. If I activated the sword case too much, no matter how powerful it was, the Dao Qi in my body wouldn't be able to support it. Everything would be in vain. Moreover, this Qingzhou cauldron was related to whether or not I could go to Qiu's tomb. Chapter 503. While waiting for Liang Tianxin, Miding City's people came to call me for breakfast. Liang Tianxin said that he would be leaving today, but he didn't tell me the exact time. Since I had nothing to do, I asked Yaya to go with me to the dining hall. At the dining table, Miding City and his son saw me and stood up at the same time. Miding City warmly greeted me, while Mitai looked behind me. He was most likely looking for the snake spirit. After a while, the snake spirit didn't appear. Mitai interrupted and asked me, "Master Zhou, why didn't Master Long come?" This time, without waiting for me to speak, Miding City's face darkened. He turned and scolded, "You unruly thing. I'm talking to Master Zhou. You're just a junior. Why are you interrupting?" After scolding him, Miding City turned and smiled apologetically at me. "My son has been spoiled since he was young. I hope Master Zhou won't blame him for his rudeness." After yesterday's matter, I didn't have a good impression of Mitai. Seeing him interrupt so rudely, I was even more displeased. However, since Miding City had scolded him, I couldn't say anything. I just glanced at Mitai before sitting down to eat breakfast. At the dining table, Miding City and his son didn't say much. After the meal, Miding City called for breakfast. Mitai wanted to stand up and leave, but Miding City stopped him and asked him to apologize to me with a dark face. Miding City's family rules were strict. Although Mitai didn't look happy, he still said to me, "Master Zhou, a few days ago I shouldn't have ignored your words and brought Master Long and Lady Yao Yao to play. Mitai hereby apologizes to you. However, I didn't mean to offend Master Zhou. I just wanted to treat Master Long and Lady Yao Yao better. I hope Master Zhou can forgive me." I nodded and said, "It's not important whether or not they disobeyed my orders. What's important is that you shouldn't take advantage of the simplicity of the two of them, acting to provoke them, and even trying to trick them into learning Dao techniques. Doing things like this instead spoils their temperament." Hearing my words, Mitai's expression changed. It was obvious that he didn't think that I would see through his intentions. The unconvinced expression on his face decreased by a lot, and he stammered, This one was rash. Master Zhou, I won't hide it from you. I've loved metaphysics since I was young, and I've always wanted to learn Taoism. It's just that my talent isn't good. I've looked for many masters, but I can't find any. This time, I heard my father talk about Master Zhou's supreme divine powers, and I feel that this might be my last chance. If I can receive Master Zhou's guidance, then I will have the chance to fulfill my long-cherished wish. Although this person had the temperament of a young master, his words were straightforward. At least he didn't pretend to be crazy and refuse to admit it. Before I could open my mouth, Mi Dingsheng was enraged. He slammed the table and shouted, "You bastard! I was wondering why you had been pestering Master Long for the past few days. It turned out that you had such intentions. I've already advised you to not force yourself if your talent isn't good. Everyone has their own fate. Did you listen to me? Master Zhou's supreme technique isn't something that you can covet. Bastard! Bastard!" After he said that, he turned to look at me and smiled wryly. "Master Zhou, I'm really sorry. This bastard has been by his grandfather's side since he was young, and has heard too much about metaphysics. He has wanted to cultivate Taoism since he was young, but the heavens didn't give him this opportunity. He visited countless famous masters on the island, but they all said that his talent wasn't good. When I went to the mainland a few years ago, I specially brought him to visit a few Taoist sects, but he still wasn't good enough. It was only in recent years that he gave up on that thought and went back to school and work. Who knew that he would have such thoughts again? A few days ago, I felt that something was wrong, but I didn't think too much about it. I really didn't think that this bastard would scheme against Master Zhou. I'm really sorry. Hearing Mi Tai's words, I originally felt disdain in my heart. I thought that this person was scheming and most likely wanted to force me to teach him Taoism. However, after hearing Mi Dingqing's words, I understood the reason. Without waiting for me to speak, Mi Tai knelt down in front of me and said emotionally, "Master Zhou, I heard my father describe a situation when you used Taoism. Since I was young, I have seen countless famous people in the Taoism world, but I have never seen anyone as powerful as Master Zhou. You are the strongest person I have ever seen in Taoism. I really shouldn't use tricks, but this is the last time I will see the hope of cultivating Taoism. I really don't want to miss it. Master Zhou, I beg you, please give me a chance. Ever since I was young, I have listened to the stories my grandfather told me. Since then, I have been wholeheartedly pursuing Taoism. Although I have studied and worked these past few years, I have never been happy. Whenever I have a chance, I will read all kinds of ancient books on Taoism. I don't know how many Taoist scriptures I have read, but the more I read, the more despair I felt. Taoism talks about qi, and Buddhism talks about qi, but I can't feel qi, nor can I feel qi. My heart has been in despair for a long time, until I saw Master Zhou this time. I beg Master Zhou, please give me a chance." As he said that, tears streamed down Mi Tai's face as he continuously kowtowed to me. I sat at the side and couldn't help but be moved as I listened. Although this rich young master was good at scheming, his heart towards Taoism was not easy to achieve. Thinking back to the past, although I also had a heart towards Taoism, I was not even half as strong as him. It was only because I met by and obtained the death scripture that I smoothly stepped into the world of Taoism. Compared to him, I was much luckier. Mi Tai continued to kowtow. Mi Dingqing's face was full of heartache, but he didn't stop him. He only closed his eyes, as if he couldn't bear to see a child in such pain. After a moment of silence, I sighed and said, "Since your heart toward Taoism is so firm, I will not have a heart of stone. Get up and let me examine your aptitude before making a decision." "Really?" Mi Tai suddenly raised his head. His originally jade-like face was completely red, and there was a bruise on his forehead. However, he didn't feel anything and excitedly said to me, "Thank you, Master Zhou. Thank you, Master Zhou." After saying that, he kowtowed 3 more times before straightening his body. However, he didn't get up and instead knelt in front of me, looking at me with eyes full of expectation. Seeing his actions, I was even more moved. I said in a low voice, "So many famous Taoists said that your aptitude is not good. Although I don't know the reason, I believe that they won't deliberately harm you. So don't expect too much. I can only promise that I will do my best." Mi Tai suddenly nodded. Of course. As long as Master Zhou can help me investigate the reason, I will be extremely grateful. I don't dare to ask for too much." Looking at his fervent expression, I sighed. I knew that his obsession was still too strong. I didn't say anything else and placed my hand on his head. The Tao energy in my body surged out from my palm and entered his body through the top of his head. It flowed downwards in an attempt to examine the condition of his meridians. The Tao energy quickly entered his heaven meridians. After circulating 1 round, I didn't find any problems. Thus, I continued to channel the Tao energy into his 8 extraordinary meridians. This time, I found a problem. Mi Tai's 8 extraordinary meridians were far different from ordinary people's. The 8 meridians were completely glued together. Even the acupoints on top were almost indistinguishable. This was not just a lack of aptitude for cultivation, it was simply impossible for him to cultivate. The 3 realms of an Earth Master were dragon seeking, pressure point sealing, and obsidian knowledge. The key to the pressure point sealing realm was the 8 extraordinary meridians. If the acupoints were not separated, how could they be opened? Mi Tai's condition was innate. Among ordinary people, it was 1 in a million. No matter how innate an ordinary person was, as long as the celestial master was willing to help, they could forcefully sense the Tao energy and step onto the path of cultivation. However, even the celestial master couldn't do anything about Mi Tai's physique. Perhaps only the legendary immortals could use celestial arts to reconstruct his physical body. On the surface, the 8 extraordinary meridians only affected the pressure point ceiling realm. However, in reality, after comprehending the Tao energy in the dragon-seeking realm, the Tao energy would be stored in the 8 extraordinary meridians. The so-called comprehension of the Tao energy would only be considered comprehension after the first strand of Tao energy was produced in the body. Like Mi Tai, who couldn't even store a strand of Tao energy in his body, how could he comprehend it? Therefore, he couldn't even step into the dragon-seeking realm. Even if he cultivated in front of the true dragon vein for his entire life, his body wouldn't be able to produce even a strand of Tao energy. Back then, before I reached the glory of consciousness realm, I was once trapped in the heavens barrier and couldn't break through. However, in comparison, Mi Tai's physique was the real heavens barrier. How could a human be able to solve the barrier set by the heavens? Chapter 504. After a long time, I sighed and retracted my hand. I nodded at Mi Tai. I understand now. Mi Tai and Mi Ding Cheng, who was standing to the side, looked at me with anticipation. How is it? I shook my head as I didn't have the heart to tell them the result. Mi Tai had obviously placed all his hopes on me, but what I said next was a death sentence for him. But his situation was hopeless. It was better to get the pain over with. It would be a good thing for him to completely give up. After thinking for a while, I hardened my heart and said, "The metaphysics experts that you found are correct. With your physique, you have no hope of sensing Tao Qi in this life, and it is even more impossible for you to embark on the path of cultivation." Hearing my words, Mi Ding Cheng closed his eyes in pain. His face was filled with unbearable pain. As for Mi Tai, he continued to stare at me blankly. The anticipation and excitement on his face disappeared in an instant, leaving behind a face of indifference and numbness. After a while, Mi Tai's body slowly weakened as he knelt on the ground. Big drops of tears flowed out from his eyes. His expression was deathly still, but his mouth remained silent. I couldn't bear it, but I couldn't comfort him. I could only look away from him. I hoped that he could walk out of this knot in his heart and not think about it anymore, and become a normal person. The quiet atmosphere made everyone feel depressed. After a long time, Mi Tai was the first to speak. He didn't do as I had hoped. After getting the final result, he didn't let go of his obsession and see through his heart's devil. Instead, he used his hands to crawl up from the ground. He straightened his back, wiped his tears, and clenched his teeth. It seems that Master Zhou's cultivation isn't enough to help me. But I won't give up. I will find someone with a higher cultivation than Master Zhou. If that doesn't work, I will find someone with a higher cultivation. If I don't cultivate in this life, I won't be happy for a day, so I definitely won't give up. After saying that, his tears stopped. His expression didn't look dispirited, but rather determined. I looked at him from the side and felt even more pity in my heart. Perseverance was a good character, but if you chose the wrong goal, it would only be a tragedy. The more Mi Tai persevered, the more pain he would suffer in the end. This wasn't running. You had to work hard towards your goal, and you would reach it one day. Even if you couldn't reach it, you would still be able to get closer. Mi Tai's goal was above the 9 heavens, but he didn't have the stairway to heaven, so he could only run on the ground. Not to mention reaching it. He couldn't even take a step closer. Under such circumstances, what was the point of persevering? After remaining silent for a moment, I sighed and said, "Although my cultivation isn't considered to be at the peak of the current world, I can be considered to have reached a higher level. From what I can see, with your physique, it's impossible for you to cultivate. No matter how high your cultivation is, it's impossible for them to help you. Why don't you listen to my advice and let go of your obsession? Only then will you be free." Hearing my persuasion, Mi Tai smiled. "Although I don't understand cultivation, I still understand that you can't make wild guesses if your cultivation isn't high enough. Master Zhou isn't the person with the highest cultivation, so how do you know that no one can help me? You say that only by letting go of your obsession can you be at ease, but I say that only by not forgetting your original intention can you be successful. How dare you? How can you talk to Master Zhou like that? Mi Ding Cheng scolded again, but this time his voice was very low. Obviously, he was very sad after hearing his son's words. Foolish child. I wanted to persuade him, but I didn't know where to start. I opened my mouth, but in the end I could only sigh. Everyone had their own fate. Since Mi Tai's heart was as firm as a rock, it was useless for me to persuade him. After sighing, I prepared to stand up and leave. However, at this moment, a bold idea suddenly appeared in my mind. With Mi Tai's physique, it was impossible for him to cultivate Dao Qi, but the path of cultivation did not only consist of Dao Qi. What if he were to cultivate Sorcerer Qi? Back then, when I was in glory of consciousness, my Dao Qi encountered a heavenly barrier and I couldn't make a breakthrough, but my witchcraft Qi progressed smoothly. Even during the solar eclipse, that absurd and strange dream was unable to stop my witchcraft Qi from advancing to glory of consciousness. From this, it can be seen how overbearing witchcraft Qi is. Mi Tai was born with 8 extraordinary meridians and did not have any acupoints, so he could not comprehend Qi of Tao. However, I do not know if he could comprehend Qi of witchcraft. After all, when I was in the second realm of dragon seeking and acupoint sealing, I did not really cultivate wizard Qi. Perhaps this was another path that Mi Tai could take. Although the heavenly barrier was a barrier set up by the heavens, the mandate of heaven was not eternal. Who could say for sure? If there was a mandate of heaven, why did the word defy heaven exist in the world? However, witchcraft Qi was of great importance. Cultivators were not accepted by the current metaphysics world. I wasn't sure if I should impart witchcraft Qi to him. Nangong wasn't around, so no one could discuss this with me. I could only make the decision myself. After thinking for a long while, I lifted my head and asked Mi Tai, I have a question for you. If I were to give you a chance to step onto the path of cultivation, would you be willing to bear any consequences? Hearing my words, Mi Tai became spirited. Just as he was about to speak, I extended my hand to interrupt him. Don't be in a hurry to answer. Remember, I'm asking about any consequences, any. Tell me after you've thought it through. Mi Tai furrowed his brows, and his expression changed. However, he didn't think for too long this time. He quickly revealed a smile and said in a clear voice, I've said it before. If I don't cultivate in this life, I won't be happy for the rest of my life. If I have the chance to step onto the path of cultivation, I won't regret it even if I die. His words were firm, but I shook my head. Death isn't the scariest thing. The consequences that I'm talking about might be 10,000 times scarier than death. Why don't you think about it a little more? Mi Tai became silent again. This time, he thought for a full 10 minutes. Finally, he lifted his head and said, I'm willing. This time, I believed his words. Only after sufficient consideration would one not need to use other words to describe the final outcome. Since he had made his decision, I also made my decision. Until today, I still don't know what exactly the mystery surrounding me is, and I can't completely confirm the meaning of shaman energy to me. However, I know that shaman energy is already a part of me and can't be separated from me. Passing it down is not my responsibility, but something that I should naturally do. After making my decision, I didn't think too much and asked Mi Tai to sit down next to me. Then, I told Mi Ding Cheng to call the others and leave. I even asked Yao Yao to return to her room. Only Mi Tai and I were left in the spacious dining room. I looked straight into his eyes and said solemnly, You already know my name, but you don't know who I am. Let me tell you first. The Feng Shui masters of Hong Kong don't know much about me, but you just have to ask around in the mainland's metaphysics world, and you will know who I am. I'm the public enemy of almost all the sects in the mainland's metaphysics world. My crime is the murder of the Taoist Association, the Metaphysics Association's president, the 3 high monks of the Buddhist Association, and the younger brother of Celestial Master Zhang from Longhu Mountain. Hence, the 3 associations in Longhu Mountain want me dead. After saying that, I looked at Mi Tai with a burning gaze. Master Zhou, you are that powerful? Mitai's reaction was completely different from what I had imagined. Not only was he not afraid, his eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "I take back what I said just now. You should be the one with the highest cultivation, right?" His reply made me not know whether to laugh or cry. However, the purpose of telling him all this was to see if he would dare to come in contact with me after knowing my identity. Now that I knew the answer, I didn't ask anymore and smiled wryly. Actually, I didn't kill those people. To be exact, I only killed one. In terms of power, I have the ability to kill a few of them, but I can't kill all of them. As for cultivation, I'm still far from being the one with the highest cultivation. That's still one of the ones with the highest cultivation. Mitai looked at me excitedly, his eyes flashing with excitement. I shook my head and didn't argue with him anymore. Instead, I continued to say, what I said just now is only one of the reasons why I became the public enemy of the metaphysics world. There's another more important reason. You should know that everyone in the metaphysics world cultivates Tao Qi, but what I cultivate, other than Tao Qi, is another kind of power called shaman Qi. Since ancient times, Tao and shaman have been incompatible. There's a saying in the metaphysics world that everyone has the right to punish the remaining members of the shaman tribe. Mitai's expression became even more excited as he quickly asked, "This shaman tribe should be the evil cult in the wuxia novels, right? Everyone has the right to punish the remaining members of the evil cult. But the martial arts of the evil cult are more powerful than the martial arts of the righteous sects. Master Zhou wants to teach me the martial arts of the evil cult." At this moment, Mitai didn't have the appearance of someone who didn't fear death at all, but was extremely lively. However, his analogy was quite appropriate. I nodded. That's about it. However, in the novels, the evil cult has sects and disciples. When they were surrounded by the righteous sects, there were still people from the same sect who worked together to resist. As for the shaman Qi that I cultivate, as far as I know, I'm the only one who cultivates it in this world. This time, Mitai was so excited that he directly stood up from his chair and said excitedly, "Isn't that even more powerful? Just like the solitary 9 swords and the 9 yang divine art, it will become the #1 in the world sooner or later." His analogy, this time, was completely different from a shaman Qi, but at this point, I already had an answer to his attitude. I glared at him and asked him to sit down. After organizing my thoughts, I said to him solemnly, "You should have already guessed what I've told you. With your physique, it's impossible for you to cultivate Tao Qi, but there's a chance for you to cultivate shaman Qi. To be honest, although I cultivate shaman Qi, I didn't start cultivating it from the beginning. Therefore, I can't teach you how to sense it and how to embark on this path, nor can I be your guide. All I can give you is a chance. As for what happens next, it's all up to you. Do you understand?" After hearing what I said, Mitai, who had just sat down, suddenly shot up from his chair and walked in front of me. He knelt down respectfully and kowtowed heavily. With a sobbing tone, he said, "Master, as long as I have a chance, I'll be satisfied. From now on, I'll definitely cultivate with all my heart to repay your kindness." Upon saying that, he wanted to kowtow again, but I waved my hand and stopped him. "It's still too early to call me master. I'm only giving you a chance. It won't be too late to call me master after you've truly comprehended shaman Qi and embarked on this path. Get up." Although I didn't acknowledge him as my disciple, Mitai insisted on kowtowing to me a few more times. He said that it wasn't a greeting for a master, but purely to express his gratitude. This time, I didn't reject him and calmly accepted his kowtow. After he got up, I circulated the shaman Qi in my body and condensed an ink ball the size of an egg in my right hand. Dark green shaman Qi flowed continuously in the ink bead. It was extremely similar to the ink bead that Xiao Jin had given me previously, but the power within it was much weaker. The ink bead that Xiao Jin had given me contained the power of the beginner stage of glorious consciousness. It was far from what a normal person like Mitai could withstand. The ink bead that I had given him only contained about 3 acupoints of shaman Qi for him to comprehend and absorb. If he could comprehend it, the shaman Qi in it would be enough for him to cultivate temporarily. Extending his hand to receive the strange ink bead, the veins on Mitai's forehead throbbed. He looked extremely excited as he carefully held it with both hands, as though he was afraid that he would lose it. After doing that, I continued to instruct him solemnly that he mustn't show this ink bead to anyone else. He mustn't tell anyone about this, not even his father. If he were to comprehend shaman qi in the future, he mustn't use it unless he was in a life and death situation. Chapter 505. After carefully instructing him, I recalled what I learned when I first stepped on the path of cultivation and told me Tai in detail. Then, I asked him to call me Ding Cheng and Yao Yao back. When me Ding Cheng returned, he saw me Tai's expression and immediately understood what had happened. He thanked me excitedly. Master Zhou, first, you saved my family from danger, and now, you've accepted my son as your disciple. I have no way to repay your great kindness. I know that you're an immortal, and you don't care about ordinary things, but other than a little money in my family, I really don't have anything else that I can offer. Please accept this card, Master Zhou. This is an anonymous black card under my Mi family's name. As long as the monthly amount doesn't exceed 30 million, Master Zhou can spend as much as you want. The Mi family will settle the accounts every month. Furthermore, my Mi family is willing to serve Master Zhou wholeheartedly. In the future, if there's anything you need from the Mi family, please don't hesitate to ask. My Mi Ding Cheng won't decline. Mi Ding Cheng was really putting in a lot of money for the monthly limit of 30 million. However, when I lowered my head to look at the black card, I wasn't moved. In the early years, when my cultivation was still low, I needed to buy some metaphysical materials for cultivation, and I still needed these yellow and white items. But as my cultivation increased, there were very few things in the mortal world that I could use. Money was almost useless to me. I shook my head. I did pass some cultivation techniques to Mi Tai, but whether or not he can comprehend them depends on his luck. That's why I didn't accept him as my disciple. Mr. Mi, you don't have to take out such a heavy gift. You didn't accept a disciple? Mi Ding Cheng was stunned, but he quickly reacted. He didn't take back the black card, but continued to say sincerely, even if I didn't accept my son, Master Zhou's kindness to my Mi family is as heavy as a mountain. Moreover, there's an ancient saying that a word can make a teacher. Although Master Zhou isn't willing to accept a disciple, my son has to treat you as a teacher. I hope that Master Zhou won't decline. The Mi family relied on feng shui, so Mi Ding Cheng naturally knew the power of feng shui. His action was very smart. After thinking for a while, I nodded and didn't refuse. I extended my hand to take the black card. Although money is of little use to me, I can't guarantee that I'll need it in the future. Rather than raising money when the time comes, I might as well take this black card. On one hand, it's convenient, and on the other hand, it's better to be prepared. Seeing me accept the black card, Mi Dingxing and Mi Tai's faces lit up. Their gazes towards me became even warmer. After dealing with these things, I pondered for a while. Then, I went to Mi Ding City to fetch some talismans. I used my shaman energy to make some talismans for Mi Tai to protect himself. Moreover, Chunshi was warned that once he cultivated shaman energy, he could use these talismans to defend against his enemies once he encountered danger. Even though the talismans were powered by shaman energy, it was concealed after all. It wouldn't allow others to recognize shaman energy with a single glance. Apart from making defensive talismans, I also made 2 5 fortune life increasing talismans and gave them to Medding City. There were very few people in the human world who had all three: fortune, and longevity. The Mi family's ancestral grave had excellent feng shui, and there was no lack of fortune and fortune. Based on this, one's longevity would definitely be affected. These 2 5 blessings longevity increasing talismans might be able to increase his lifespan by a few years. After I explained the reason, Mi Ding Cheng was very grateful and kept thanking me. I was indifferent. If people respect me, I will return it tenfold. It was my principle in life. After doing all that, I felt Liang Tianxin's aura coming to this place. To avoid more problems, I didn't sit there and wait. I took the fox girl Yao Yao and said goodbye to Mi Ding Cheng. Since I had told him that I was leaving today, The me father and son didn't ask me to stay. They got up and wanted to send me out. I shook my head and stopped them. I left the me family's manor with Yao Yao. Liang Tianxin's black fiend seal was still on me. I wasn't worried that he wouldn't find me. After leaving the me family, I took Yao Yao and walked forward. Sure enough, a moment later, a black sedan with a Hong Kong license plate stopped next to me. I turned around and saw Liang Tianxin sitting in the car. Of course, the hunchback old man was also there, sitting next to him. Liang Tianxin's face darkened when he saw me. He asked me why I didn't wait in the me family's manor, but I brushed him off. When he learned that I had filled the Qingzhou cauldron with witchcraft energy, he nodded and asked me to get in the car. I had to take Yao Yao with me on this trip to Shandong. I didn't mention it before, so Liang Tianxin and the hunchback didn't know. Liang Tianxin's face darkened again. He scolded, "You little brat, you don't know anything. This trip is very important, so we have to be careful. It's fine if you lust for women, but why are you still thinking about women at this time? Don't you know that lust is like a knife scraping the bone? I really don't know how you cultivated to this realm." He scolded me for a long time, but I didn't say anything. After he finished, I smiled and pointed at Yao Yao. "Taoist Liang, didn't you notice anything strange about this woman?" "Oh." Hearing what I said, Liang Tianxin and the hunchbacked old man's gaze turned to Yao Yao. Both of them were heavenly master cultivators, so they had good knowledge. They hadn't paid much attention to Yao Yao before, but now that they were paying attention, they quickly realized something was wrong. The hunchback old man frowned and asked, "Monster energy? Could she be a fox demon?" I nodded. "Taoist friend, you have good eyesight. This woman is indeed a fox demon." Liang Tianxin suddenly raised his head and asked in surprise, "I can see that she has monster energy, but she only has glory of consciousness cultivation. Legend has it that the demon race needs to reach the heavenly master realm to transform into a human. Only the fox demon of Qingqiu can transform into a human at glory of consciousness. Could this woman be a fox of Qingqiu?" The hunchback old man continued, "Qingqiu foxes are ancient species, especially the Qingqiu foxes. Their pure monster energy is a treasure that is extremely useful to cultivators of our generation." After the two of them finished speaking, they looked at each other with greed in their eyes. But very quickly, Liang Tianxin shook his head imperceptibly. The hunchbacked old man smiled, concealing the greed in his eyes. He turned to me and said with a smile, "You're quite lucky, kid. You even managed to find a legendary prehistoric variant. No wonder you have such cultivation at such a young age. However, why are you bringing this fox girl with you now?" I smiled faintly. It was obvious what the two of them were thinking. Even though they coveted Yao Yao, the nine-tailed fox, in comparison, Chiyo's tomb was more important. Thus, they suppressed their greed and didn't want to snatch it. "Taoist Liang, you should remember that I didn't hesitate to offend you in order to fight for the 2 7-star mugwort leaves in the me family, right? To tell you the truth, the 7-star mugwort leaves are of great use to me. Although I've obtained the 2 leaves, they are far from enough. After investigating these days, I confirmed that the 7-star mugwort only grows in the country of Qingqiu. I've specially found this fox girl to take me to the country of Qingqiu." I didn't hide anything and directly stated my purpose. I also told them that the country of Qingqiu was within the territory of the cave and that it wasn't far from the tomb of Qiyu. After that, I smiled and said, "Since the two places aren't far from each other, I'm thinking of taking this fox girl with me to Shandong. If you're not in a hurry to go to the tomb of Qiyu, you might as well let me go to the country of Qingqiu first. Of course, if you're in a hurry, you can go to the tomb of Qiyu first. It won't be too late for me to visit the country of Qingqiu after I come out." Hearing my words, Liang Tianxin and the hunchback old man turned to look at each other and immediately replied, "Because you didn't show up earlier, I've postponed the trip to the tomb of Qiyu for a long time. In any case, I can't delay it any longer. I'm afraid I don't have time for you to go to the country of Qingqiu first. After we get out of the tomb of Qiyu, you can go wherever you want." What do you think? Their answer wasn't out of my expectation. In fact, I could see through Liang Tianxin's thoughts at first glance. He and I had a blood feud. At this time, he didn't want to take revenge because he needed a person who could cultivate witchcraft energy to go to the tomb of Chi-Yu. After we got out of the tomb of Chi-Yu, they would definitely attack me. At that time, they would kill me and take away Yao Yao, the fox girl of the country of Qingxiu. Of course, they wouldn't allow me to go to the country of Qingxiu first. I smiled and nodded. It was a deal. Then I got in the car with Yao Yao and followed Liang Tianxin and the hunchback old man to the airport. The distance between Hong Kong and the cave was more than 1,000 miles. It wasn't practical to drive there. Moreover, Liang Tianxin and the hunchback old man were celestial masters, so they weren't afraid of planes like Geo masters. That was why they chose to travel by plane. At first, I thought we would take a commercial plane, but I didn't expect that Liang Tianxin would have a private plane. When we arrived at the airport, he took us to a medium-sized private plane and took off. A few hours later, we arrived in Shandong. We didn't go to Jinan or Tsingtao. Instead, the plane landed at Xufu Airport in Jining. Chapter 506. Jui County belonged to Hezi City, but its specific location was closer to Jining City in the east. It got its name because of the ancient Day swamp in its territory. It was very close to Sishui County, where the Qingxiu country was located. Only Jining and Xufu were between them. Based on this, it was logical that the Yellow Emperor killed Chi-Yu and buried him in Jui. We were currently at Xufu Airport, which was closer to Sisui. However, since I had promised Liang Tianxin to go to Jui first, I didn't linger. After we left the airport, we took a taxi and headed to Jui. On the way, the taxi driver recognized Liang Tianxin and Li Mozi's Hong Kong accent. He chatted with them and told us that he was from Giant Savage Town. Do you want to come to Giant Field to invest or to have fun? Liang Tianxin's personality was cold. He sat there without saying a word. But the hunchback old man smiled and talked to the taxi driver in broken Mandarin. He said that they were history scholars from the Chinese University of Hong Kong and specialized in ancient culture. They were here to visit Chiyo's Jianzhu tomb. When we talked about Chiyo's Jianzhu mound, the driver became excited. He patted his thigh and said, "We've come to the right place. Chiyo's Jianzhu mound is in Jui County. Every year, many people come here to worship it. It's the most orthodox Chi-Yu mound." After saying that, he also complained, "I don't know how this name came about. If it's called the Tomb of Chi-Yu, then so be it. Why did it have to be written as the Mount of Chi-Yu?" Naoyang Valley also says that their place is the Mount of Chi-Yu. Don't you think it's infuriating? The Chiyo's tomb here was repaired more than 10 years ago. I heard that in ancient times, there was also a temple built here. No matter how you look at it, it's the most authentic one here. Yang Valley probably wants to develop tourism, so they dare to make up all kinds of lies. They even dare to recognize the graves of their ancestors. Aren't they afraid of being criticized? Speaking of these things, not only did the taxi driver speak logically, he even knew about the tomb of Chi-Yu in Yang Valley. It seemed that the news of the two places fighting over the tomb of Chi-Yu had already spread to the common people. But in reality, what he said did not make sense. Juyi and the tomb of Chi-Yu were not fake. The so-called Chiyo's shoulder mound was, in fact, the place where Chiyo's body was buried. The shoulder refers to the shoulder, and the leg refers to the femur, which is the thigh bone. Therefore, the meaning of shoulder bone is extended to the body. It was said that the Yellow Emperor's battle to kill Chi-Yu was extremely difficult. After he killed Chi-Yu, he was still worried about his body, so he cut off his head and buried it with his body. Her body was buried in Jui, and it was called the Jianwei tomb. Her head was buried in Yang Valley, and it was called the main tomb. However, later generations called it the Imperial Ant tomb. As we chat along the way, we soon reached Jui's territory. Since Chiyo's shoulder mound was in Jui County, we didn't look for a hotel to stay. Instead, we asked the driver to take us to the Chiyu Square in the northeast of Jui County. After we got out of the car, Liang Tianxin and the hunchback old man took us to a nearby hotel. We didn't even check in and directly went to the hotel room. Then, I realized that they had already prepared this place. I guess they had booked the hotel room all year round. After a simple meal, Liang Tianxin asked me to give him the Qingzhou cauldron. This small cauldron was extremely important to me. Now that it was in my hands, there was no reason for me to give it away. However, it wasn't a good time to fall out with him. I told him that as long as the Qingzhou cauldron left my body, the witchcraft energy in it would quickly disappear. I had to keep it close to me and constantly pour my witchcraft energy into it to ensure that it was full of witchcraft energy. After all, I was the only one who had witchcraft energy. After listening to me, Liang Tianxin frowned, but he didn't insist on asking for the cauldron. He just asked me not to wander around and to stay in the room to continue pouring my witchcraft energy into the cauldron. I had to ensure that the cauldron was full of witchcraft energy and prepare to enter the Chiyou's tomb tonight. After that, he asked the hunchback old man to supervise me while he went to the Chiyou square alone. He said that he wanted to check the situation outside the Chiyou's tomb one last time to ensure that nothing would go wrong during tonight's operation. After he left, I had nothing to do, so I chatted with the hunchback old man. Compared to Liang Tianxin, the hunchback old man was much more amiable and talkative. According to his introduction, his name was Qiao Sigue, the descendant of a Xiangxi corpse clan. At the beginning of the last century, his parents had settled in Hong Kong and founded the corpse clan. He was born and raised in Hong Kong. Although he had the name of the Xiangxi corpse clan, he was actually a native of Hong Kong. Speaking of the corpse clan, it wasn't a small sect. There were many movies about it in Hong Kong, and their techniques were mostly related to controlling corpses. I recalled the techniques of the corpse sect I had studied in the corpse sect. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to chat with him. At first, Qiao Sigue wore an indifferent face and casually chatted with me. However, when I mentioned the techniques of the corpse sect, such as refining and controlling corpses, his face gradually turned serious. He stared at me for a long time and didn't say anything. Eventually, he viciously asked me, "Where did I learn about the techniques of the corpse clan?" I was bewildered. The techniques of the corpse clan and the corpse sect were the same. Could it be that the two of them are related? I shook my head and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Qiao, I've never been to Hong Kong or Xiangxi before. How would I know the cultivation technique of your corpse-herding sect? I'm talking about the techniques I got by chance in a corpse-raising sect in Xiangxi. They have nothing to do with your corpse clan." My words weren't false, but Qiao Sigue still wore a skeptical face. Obviously, he didn't believe me. However, he didn't ask further. He sat cross-legged and didn't say anything else. Since he didn't want to talk, I didn't take the initiative to talk to him. I also sat down and began to adjust my breathing. Although I wasn't afraid of Liang Tianxin and Qiao Sigue, I didn't know the situation inside the tomb. I had to be careful. Not long after that, Liang Tianxin returned. He didn't say anything to me, but he called Qiao Sigue to another room. The two of them were secretly plotting something. After dinner, the sky was completely dark. There weren't many entertainment activities at night in a small city like Zhui. After 11 o'clock p.m., there was no one outside. At this moment, Liang Tianxin and Qiao Sigue came and called me and Yao Yao. We left the hotel and headed to the Chiyou Square. The sky was dark, and the lights in the Chiyou Square were turned off. However, with my cultivation base, I could see things at night as well as during the day. When we arrived at the Chiyou Square, I lifted my head and saw a stone that looked like a maple leaf standing at the entrance of the square. There was a pedestal under the stone with 4 big words, Chiyou Square. According to the legend, after Chiyou was killed by the Yellow Emperor, his blood turned into a maple forest. This stone was shaped like a maple leaf. I guess it was from this story. After we entered the square, we saw something that looked like an altar in the center. In the middle of the altar was a stone statue of Chiyou's upper body. There were 9 steps at the bottom. When we climbed up the steps, we saw a square platform made of polished marble. The pedestal of the statue was also square and made of mushroom-shaped granite. The front of the pedestal was carved with the words Chiyou in seal script. On the east side of the pedestal was the Zhuli tribe. According to the legend, Chiyou was a member of the Zhuli tribe in the Eastern Barbarian tribe. The painting depicted scenes of primitive life, such as fishing, hunting, farming, smelting, and making fire. The back of the pedestal depicted Chiyo's life in classical Chinese. On the pedestal was a large statue of Chiyo. It was around 3 meters tall, with a sharp face and bright eyes that gazed into the distance. Besides these, there was only a pile of stones behind the altar that looked like a rock garden. It looked like a tomb. Chiyo's shoulder mound was most likely there. While I was about to go there, Liang Tianxin stopped by the altar. I didn't know where he got some incense sticks from. He rubbed them and lit them up. Then, he bowed to the statue of Chiyo a few times. Afterward, he inserted the incense sticks into an old incense burner in front of the altar. After everything was done, he called us. We walked up the steps and came to the statue of Chiyo. At this point, he and Xiao Sige stood in front of each other and formed a spell with their hands. Then, they pressed their hands on the base of the statue. With a slight sound, the 3-meter-tall statue, along with its base, was moved away by the two of them, revealing a deep cave entrance below. Chapter 507. After finding the entrance, Liang Tianxin was the first one to go in. After his figure disappeared, Xiao Sige pointed at the entrance, signaling me and Yao Yao to go in. Yao Yao's complexion was a little pale. I had the experience of the Yinshang royal tomb, so I wasn't afraid of this cave. I nodded and reached out to hold Yao Yao. Imitating Liang Tianxin's actions, we jumped into the cave. With my current cultivation base, although I didn't have the flying ability of a heavenly master, I wouldn't fall to my death even if I jumped 100 meters. In fact, this cave only looked deep on the surface. After jumping in, we landed 4 to 5 meters before our feet touched the ground. After stabilizing my footing, I let go of Yao Yao and looked ahead. The cave was surrounded by mud, and there was only a narrow passage in front of us that could fit one person. On both sides of the passage, there were obvious traces of human excavation. Moreover, it didn't look old. It was most likely Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigui's work. While I was observing, I suddenly felt some movement above us. I hurried to pull Yao Yao away. As soon as we dodged, Xiao Sigui descended from the sky. After he landed, Liang Tianxin moved closer to him. The two of them cast a spell to move the heavy Chiyu statue above us back to its original position, completely covering the entrance. After that, Liang Tianxin pointed at the passage in front of us and took the lead. I followed him with Yao Yao, while Xiao Sige was responsible for bringing up the rear. We walked along the narrow passage. Since we didn't bring any lighting equipment, it was extremely dark, and the ground under our feet was a little uneven. For Liang Tianxin, old Xiao, and me, it wasn't a problem. However, Yao Yao's cultivation base was still low, so she stumbled along the way. However, with my careful care, nothing happened. The terrain in the passage was uneven, but overall, it extended downward. After walking for around 2 kilometers, we finally saw a glimmer of light in front of us. I was surprised. There was light in front of us. Could it be that the end of this passage was above ground? However, after thinking about it, I eliminated this possibility. It was nighttime outside, so if we went outside, there wouldn't be any light. Moreover, we had been walking all the way down, so we should be deep underground. I was puzzled, but I didn't ask and continued to follow Liang Tianxin. After walking a few hundred steps, the light in front of me became clearer. I could vaguely see that the light at the end of the tunnel wasn't natural light, but a dim yellow light. It should be the lighting equipment that Liang Tianxin and the others had brought in beforehand. It was just as I had expected. After following Liang Tianxin out of the tunnel, we entered a huge underground cave. There were 2 huge lamps on both sides of the entrance, one on the left and one on the right. They illuminated the entire cave as if it was daytime. These 2 lamps were electrically powered. We couldn't connect wires here, so we couldn't light here all the time. It seemed that Liang Tianxin had come earlier today because he had brought batteries and other things with him. He had come in first to turn on the 2 lights. However, it was a heavenly master. It wasn't something. With 2. With. With. But thinking about it, with his skills as a celestial master, it wouldn't be difficult for him to do this. I lifted my eyes to look at the rock wall that was illuminated by the searchlight. The rock wall was around 10 meters high, and it was covered with jagged rocks of strange shapes. However, it was very dry. There was no moss on it, nor were there any traces of man-made excavation. It should have been naturally formed. However, the color of the rocks was a little strange. I wasn't sure if it was the effect of the searchlight or the color of the rocks themselves. The entire rock wall was dark red, and it looked like solidified blood. It carried an inexplicable, murderous aura that made people feel fear. However, after observing for a long time, I didn't see any cave or passage on this rock wall. I felt strange. Was the so-called Chiyo's shoulder mound a cave like this? While I was puzzled, Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue walked over. Each of them carried a lamp and moved the light from the wall we were facing to the wall on the left. As the light moved, my eyes also moved. This time my eyes widened. The rock wall on the left side of the cave. No, it wasn't a rock wall. On the left side of the cave, there was not a single rock. There were only 2 giant doors standing there. The 10-meter-tall doors were engraved with many complicated patterns. When I looked at them carefully, I couldn't see any pattern. However, when I looked at them, it looked like a headless giant standing there. It held a weapon that looked like a battle axe in one hand and something that looked like a teapot in the other. It looked like it was fighting against something invisible, and its body was surrounded by murderous aura. Besides the giant drawing, the color of the 2 giant doors was also very strange. The previous rock wall looked dark red, but these 2 giant doors were pure bright red. It was as if they had been soaked in blood. Even the giant on the door looked like it was bathed in blood. It looked savage and bloody. When Yao Yao and I first saw it, we were shocked by the giant doors. We stood there for a long time without moving. It was obvious that Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue had seen these giant doors before. They didn't find it strange and just glanced at it. Then they walked to the side of the giant doors and rubbed them a few times. Afterward, they called me over. As I walked to the front of the door, I could feel how majestic and awe-inspiring the giant doors were. I extended my hand and touched the door. It was cold to the touch. The giant doors seemed to be made of bronze. Since this was the Chiyo's tomb, these 2 giant doors were naturally ancient objects. In terms of size, they were much larger than the Queen Mother Wu cauldron from the Shang dynasty. Even the patterns on them were very exquisite. If news of this were spread, history would be overturned. While my mind was in a mess, Liang Tianxin suddenly pointed at the top of the giant door and said to me, "Raise your head and look up. In the middle of the 2 doors, where the giant's heart is engraved, there is a groove. Later, the 2 of us will fly up with you. You will hold the Qingzhou cauldron and place it in the groove. Then, the door will open. Do you understand?" I nodded and raised my head to look in the direction that Liang Tianxin had pointed. Sure enough, I saw an inconspicuous groove in the giant's heart. It was hidden among the complicated patterns. If I didn't look carefully, I wouldn't be able to see it. After confirming with me, Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue extended their hands, each holding one of my armpits, and soared into the air, bringing me to face the notch. I raised my head to take a look. The groove was only the size of a palm, but it was very deep. It looked like it led to the inside of the giant doors. However, the inside of the giant doors also seemed to be dark. I stared at it carefully, but even with my eyesight, I couldn't see anything. I didn't dare to delay any longer and took out the Qingzhou cauldron. Just as I was about to place it in the groove, Liang Tianxin suddenly said, "Something's wrong." When he suddenly spoke, I immediately stopped. I didn't hurry to place the Qingzhou cauldron, but turned to look at him. Xiao Sigue also asked him curiously, "What's wrong?" Liang Tianxin reached into the groove and touched it. His expression became increasingly unsightly. He pointed at the groove and said, "When we left here the last time, I placed a strand of cat hair in this groove. It's gone now." "Cat hair?" Xiao Sigue was stunned for a moment, then chuckled. "Cat hair is extremely thin and belongs to the Yin attribute. If it was placed here, even with our cultivation, it wouldn't be easy to detect. Old ghost, you're really meticulous." After saying that, he looked at Liang Tianxin thoughtfully. Xiao Sigue seemed to be implying something, and I immediately understood. This place was discovered by the two of them. Liang Tianxin had secretly set up a small detection mechanism, but he didn't tell Xiao Sigue. It was obvious that he was wary of Xiao Sigue, afraid that he would come here alone to open the giant door without his knowledge. Xiao Sigue obviously understood this, which was why he was being sarcastic. After mocking him, Xiao Sigue also knew his priorities and didn't say anything else. Instead, he said, "It's been more than a year since we left. It's inevitable that there will be airflow in such a big cave." It's not strange that the cat hair was blown away. Liang Tianxin shook his head, his tone becoming more and more cautious. This cave doesn't communicate with the outside world, so it's impossible for there to be wind. Moreover, when I came to check in the afternoon, I purposely came up to take a look, and the cat hair is still there. It's been more than a year, and the cat hair hasn't been blown away. It's only been a few hours since the afternoon. How could the cat hair be blown away by the wind? Chapter 508. Not only did he come here, but he also put or took something out of the notch. Liang Tianxin nodded and slowly uttered those words. His face looked terrible. Hearing that, Xiao Sigue was shocked. He turned to look at the Qingzhou cauldron in my hand and exclaimed, "That's impossible. That's impossible. There's only one Qingzhou cauldron, and this guy has always been with me. No one else could have opened this door." Liang Tianxin sighed. Although there's only one Qingzhou cauldron, there were 9 cauldrons in ancient times. Who knows if the other 8 cauldrons could also open this door? Then, he didn't wait for Xiao Sigue's reply. He gritted his teeth and said, "Don't panic. Open the door. Let's go down first." The two of them brought me back to the ground. After we landed, Liang Tianxin let go of my arm and looked at the notch. Then, he lowered his head and scanned the ground. After looking for a while, he took a few steps forward and picked up a thin strand of hair from the ground. It seemed to be the cat hair he'd mentioned. After picking it up, he didn't look at it. Instead, he walked over and handed it to me. He said solemnly, "Carefully sense the aura on this cat hair." Needless to say, I understood what he meant. I took the cat hair and carefully sensed it. As expected, I felt a faint trace of shaman energy on it. I had to admit that Liang Tianxin was clever. He could set up a mechanism with a thin strand of cat hair. It was very difficult to be discovered, and it was very effective. Not only could he detect if someone had touched the notch, but the cat hair had a strong attachment to aura. No matter if it was Taoist or shaman energy, the aura on it would linger for a long time. The cat hair had the aura of shaman energy, which meant that someone had used shaman energy in the notch, or had placed some kind of artifact that contained shaman energy. Combining all the other circumstances, it was highly possible that someone had been one step ahead of us and had used a small cauldron filled with shaman energy to open this door. After confirming it, I nodded at Liang Tianxin. Instantly, Liang Tianxin furrowed his brows, his face extremely cold. Who could it be? Who could it be? Hunchback, have you ever leaked any information about this place? Xiao Sigue was obviously in extremely bad mood at this moment, and he replied icily as well. Both of us have obtained this enormous, fortuitous encounter. In these past few years, I've been sleeping alone because I have the habit of talking in my sleep. I'm afraid I'll reveal this enormous, fortuitous encounter in my sleep. Do you think I'll leak the news? Liang Tianxin's expression changed several times. He turned his head and stared at me. The two of us came here a few years ago, but we didn't find any traces of anyone else. But now someone suddenly came. Did you leak the news? I helplessly spread my hands. Taoist Liang, you brought me here today. Liang Tianxin seemed to have realized that he was being too impatient. After a moment of silence, he changed the topic and asked, "You're a person who cultivates wizard energy. Do you know of anyone else in the world who cultivates wizard energy like you?" His question was very important. If other people wanted to open this door, they also needed to inject their wizard energy into the small cauldron. From this point, I could indeed find some clues. Besides me, Nangong is the only person who cultivates wizard energy in the world. Of course, it's also possible that he's a sacrificial offering to an evil spirit. However, his cultivation is too high, and I can't tell what kind of power he has. When I asked him about it, he gave me a vague answer. I'm not sure if he cultivates wizard energy or not. Could it be that Nan Gong went in ahead of us? I recalled the situation in the Yinshang Royal Mausoleum. It wasn't strange for Nan Gong to appear here. However, if he appeared, he would most likely contact me in advance. At the very least, he would leave me a message. Although I was being watched by Liang Tianxin and Qiao Sigue, with Nangong's means, it wouldn't be difficult for him to avoid them. Why didn't he leak any information? Could it be that it wasn't Nangong, but someone else? I suddenly thought of Tao Wu. It wasn't because Tao Wu cultivates wizard energy, but because Liang Tianxin was the one who had set up the 28 Evil Underworld formation near my high school. Although I didn't know his ultimate purpose for setting up the formation, it seemed to be related to Tao Wu and the tomb of Qi Yu. It was highly possible that it was also related to Nangong. After letting my imagination run wild for a while, I shook my head at Liang Tianxin. As far as I know, I'm the only one who cultivates wizard energy in the world. This time, Liang Tianxin didn't say anything. Instead, it was Qiao Sigue who stared at me and asked, "All cultivators have a master. You don't need a master to teach you how to cultivate wizard energy. Did you learn it from nowhere?" I shook my head with a smile and ignored him. Then, I turned to Liang Tianxin and said, "Fellow Taoist Liang, you met the master who taught me how to cultivate wizard energy. You should know that I'm telling the truth." Of course, I was referring to Xiao Jin. Liang Tianxin was slightly stunned. He nodded and didn't say anything else. Then, he turned to Qiao Sigue and explained a low voice. The three of us became silent. I didn't know what Liang Tianxin and Qiao Sigue were thinking about, while I stared at the two huge doors in front of me. I kept thinking about the swan in eye in the fire god temple. Did the Qi Yu tomb hide the secret of what had happened in the past? Was the so-called way of heaven that bound Tao Wu also related to Qi Yu's tomb? Also, what role did Liang Tianxin play in this matter? With my current cultivation, killing Liang Tianxin and searching his soul was also an option. However, the Celestial Master was a Celestial Master after all. Killing him was easy, but searching his soul was difficult. The Celestial Master's soul was extremely condensed. Unless one cultivated the Yang Spirit and used the power of the Yang Spirit to search his soul, it would be impossible to find anything. After a long silence, Liang Tianxin finally clenched his teeth and made a decision. The situation is still uncertain. We don't need to be depressed. Even if someone enters before us, it won't be easy to obtain Qi Yu's inheritance. We still have a chance. Then, he and Xiao Sige grabbed my arms and brought me to the groove so that I could put the Qingzhou cauldron inside. I didn't understand what he meant by Qi Yu's inheritance, but his decision was the same as mine. Regardless of whether someone entered before us or not, we definitely had to go to Qi Yu's tomb. I took out the Qingzhou cauldron again and carefully placed it inside the groove. As soon as I put it in, there was a dull thud behind the giant door. It was as if the giant on the door had hit the ground with a giant axe. Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sige hurriedly brought me to the ground and stared at the giant door nervously. After a while, the giant door shook heavily and slowly slid backward, revealing a gap. Liang Tianxin pointed at the gap and told me, "Yao Yao and Xiao Sige to enter first." He flew to the groove and waited for us to enter. Then, he took out the Qingzhou cauldron and followed us in with a flash. After we entered, the giant door closed again with a loud rumble. Similar to the inside of the Shang dynasty's tomb, the inside of Qi Yu's tomb was pitch black. Of course, this was only for ordinary people. With our cultivation, the pitch black environment wouldn't affect our eyesight. We could still see everything in our surroundings. I looked around. The inside of the tomb was extremely crude. Not only was it not as grand as the inside of the Shang dynasty's tomb, it couldn't even compare to the underground palace under Swan Yi's tomb. It was just a cave that was much larger than the outside. However, just the word large was enough to shock me. I roughly estimated that the cave behind the giant door was almost 100 meters high. The distance between the two sides was even more frightening. It was at least 1,000 meters. Although we had been going down the tunnel outside, it was hard to say if we had gone down 100 meters. According to common sense, the top of the cave was very close to the ground. Of course, this was Chio's tomb. After all, we couldn't use common sense to judge it. Apart from being huge, there seemed to be nothing special about this place. In a huge cave, other than some jagged rocks, there was nothing else. Only on the other side of the stone wall, directly opposite the huge door, there was a round hole, as if there was another world inside. Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigui didn't pay attention to me and Yao Yao. The two of them walked around the stone wall. When they reached the entrance of the dark cave, they waved their hands and beckoned me to come over. When I reached the cave entrance, I lifted my eyes and found something strange. The cave entrance wasn't big, only about the height of a person. From afar, it seemed incomparably dark, but now that I was in front of it, I raised my eyes to take a closer look. I could only see a patch of darkness, unable to see anything inside. With my cultivation, my vision couldn't be blocked by pure darkness. There was definitely something strange about this place. I lifted my head to look at Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigui. They were also frowning and looking at the cave entrance. It was obvious that they had found something strange. Xiao Sigui seemed to be impatient. After a moment of silence, he picked up a stone from the ground and threw it into the cave entrance. After the stone entered the cave, it disappeared into the darkness. After a while, we heard the sound of the stone falling on the ground. After a short while, Xiao Sigui said, "You guys wait outside. I'll go in and check. If there's no problem, I'll inform you." Liang Tianxin nodded and said, "Be careful." Chapter 509. Liang Tianxin and I were already tense. When we heard Xiao Sigui's scream, we were shocked. Liang Tianxin reacted faster than me. A white flute-like magic tool appeared in his hand. It looked pale and seemed to be made of white bones. After taking out the magic tool, he looked around as if he was looking for an enemy hiding in the dark. I hurried to look at Xiao Sigui. At first glance, I noticed his right foot. Only the heel of his right foot was still there. The sole of his foot in front seemed to have been chopped off by a sharp knife. I turned to look at the dark light screen at the entrance of the cave in surprise. Xiao Sigui had stepped into the light screen with his right foot, which had caused the injury to the sole of his foot. Could it be that the light screen was filled with some kind of power that attacked people as soon as they entered? Or was there something wrong with the light screen itself that caused Xiao Sigui's foot to melt after stepping in? But if that was the case, why was the stone he had thrown in fine? Moreover, Xiao Sigui was a heavenly master with a tough body. When he had braved the danger to enter the cave, he must have gathered his Tao energy and been on guard. If he had been in danger, he would have mobilized his Tao energy to defend himself. What kind of power was hidden in the light screen, or behind it, that Xiao Sigui had been severely injured before he could react? Xiao Sigui couldn't enter the light screen, and with my cultivation, I couldn't be much stronger than him. We were in trouble now. While I stared at the light screen, Liang Tianxin lowered his head to check on Xiao Sigui's injury. What happened just now? Although Xiao Sigui was a heavenly master, his face was pale. He shook his head and said, "I didn't find anything strange. I just felt something on my foot, and I was severely injured before I could react. Fortunately, I reacted quickly. Otherwise, I would have lost my life if I had walked in with my whole body." Liang Tianxin's frown deepened when he heard that. He turned to look at the dark entrance of the cave, thinking about something. At that moment, I had a vague idea. Judging from the strand of cat hair outside, it was very likely that someone had entered before us. However, we were in this huge cave, and we couldn't see anything. It was obvious that the person who had entered before us wasn't here. In that case, there were only two possibilities. Either that person had already left, or he had entered this small, dark hole. Judging from the time, it had only been a few hours since the afternoon. No matter what that person did in Chio's tomb, he shouldn't have left so quickly. Therefore, the person who came in first was most likely in this small cave. This light screen was so strange, so how could that person enter? No matter who that person is, in terms of cultivation, he can't be much stronger than Xiao Sigui. Even Nangong is only a heavenly master. He once told me that he doesn't have a yang spirit. With such a deduction, that person most likely found a way to enter the light screen. This method did not seem difficult to deduce. The stone that Xiao Sigui threw away did not show any abnormalities, but he was injured when he went in. From this, it could be concluded that this light screen was able to detect the things that entered. The stone was an inanimate object, so it was fine to enter. However, Xiao Sigui was a living creature, and he cultivated Taoist qi, so he was injured. Combined with the fact that opening the door outside required a small cauldron full of witchcraft energy, this light screen was most likely to screen the people who entered. If it was someone who cultivated witchcraft energy, someone who held a small cauldron full of witchcraft energy, or someone who wrapped themselves in witchcraft energy, they could enter. As soon as I made this judgment, I heard Liang Tianxin's voice. He said to me without hesitation, "Zhou, go and try. See if you can enter." I didn't know if he had the same idea as me, or if he just wanted to use me as a meat shield. I wasn't annoyed, so I nodded and prepared to go and try. However, Yao Yao, who was behind me, reached out and pulled me. She looked worried, and it was obvious that she didn't want me to take the risk. I gave her a reassuring look and comforted her with a smile. After she let go of me, I walked toward the light screen. However, before I went over, I asked for the Qingzhou cauldron. I said that since the Qingzhou cauldron was the key to open the door outside, it was very likely to be the key to open this door. Liang Tianxin felt that it made sense, so he didn't say anything and handed the Qingzhou cauldron back to me. I took the Qingzhou cauldron and walked over. First, I brought the Qingzhou cauldron close to the light screen. After a part of it went through, I pulled it back. After taking a closer look, I didn't see any damage on it. I calmed down a little. The Qingzhou cauldron was different from the previous stone. It was full of witchcraft energy. After experimenting with the Qingzhou cauldron, it proved that the light screen didn't block witchcraft energy. Of course, I didn't walk in recklessly. Next, I gathered a strand of witchcraft energy on my fingertip and carefully poked it into the light screen. Just like with the Qingzhou cauldron, I smoothly went through and brought it out. There was no problem. Now, I had a rough idea of what to do. I extended my finger and poked it into the light screen. I didn't feel any pain. I moved my finger, which was hidden behind the light screen, and wasn't restricted. It seemed that my speculation was correct. I didn't hesitate and walked in. There was a flash before my eyes, and I was in another space. After entering, another stone door appeared in front of me. It looked like a smaller version of the stone door at the outermost area. It was about the same size as the light screen, and it was only as tall as a person. However, there was a small gap on this stone door. I didn't know if it was originally like this, or if the person who had entered before hadn't closed it after opening it. At this moment, the Qingzhou cauldron was with me. If I didn't go out to receive them, Liang Tianxin and the other person wouldn't be able to enter. However, I hesitated and decided to go out to receive them first. Firstly, Yao Yao was still outside. Secondly, I wasn't familiar with this place. Liang Tianxin and the other person had been eyeing this place for many years, so they definitely knew something that I didn't. It was only right for them to lead the way. Thirdly, although this place looked peaceful, it was actually filled with hidden dangers. With the two of them leading the way, I could avoid some risks. In addition, I couldn't abandon Liang Tianxin before I figured out the truth behind the 28 Fiend Yellow Springs formation. After some consideration, I passed through the light screen and returned outside. Everyone was delighted to see me come out. Before they could speak, I handed the Qingzhou cauldron to Xiao Sigui and told him that he would be able to enter safely with the small cauldron in his hand. In fact, I wasn't sure if it was the effect of the small cauldron or the shaman energy in my body. However, compared to Liang Tianxin, Xiao Sigui's life wasn't worth much. I would let him explore the way first. The injury on the sole of his foot was naturally nothing to a heavenly master. After receiving the small cauldron, Xiao Sigui didn't say anything and directly walked towards the light screen. Just like what I had done just now, he held the small cauldron and tested it. After confirming that there was indeed no danger, he directly went in. After he went in, he obviously observed the situation inside. After about half a minute, he handed the Qingzhou cauldron over through the light screen. Liang Tianxin took the small cauldron and followed him in. Yao Yao and I were the last to enter. After entering, Liang Tianxin and Yao Yao fixed their eyes on the stone door in front of them. They didn't pay attention to me, nor did they ask me for the Qingzhou cauldron. Naturally, I wouldn't take the initiative to hand it over to them. I directly put it on my body and began to observe the surroundings. Although I had already entered once, I had only been paying attention to the door in front of me and hadn't paid attention to my surroundings. Now, I began to observe the surroundings carefully. After observing for a while, I found that there was nothing special about the surroundings. It was almost the same as the big hole outside. Apart from the stones on the walls, there was nothing worth paying attention to. Soon, Liang Tianxin called us, and we walked to the stone door together. Since the stone door was open, we naturally didn't have to worry about opening it. The only thing we had to worry about was whether there would be hidden dangers behind the stone door, like the light screen earlier. Of course, we also had to consider whether there would be people inside. If someone entered first, would they notice our movements and ambush us inside? This time, Liang Tianxin didn't use me as a meat shield. He was the first to enter the door. He didn't hurry but stood there and looked inside. I didn't know what he had found, but he watched for half a minute before entering. At the same time, he waved his hand and asked us to follow him. Xiao Sigui was the second to enter, and I followed behind them. After slipping through the crack of the door, I immediately felt a faint red light behind the door. When I lifted my head to look, I was stunned. The entrance was also a rather large cave, but this cave was different from the outside. The shape of the cave was roughly the shape of a steamed bun, and the curved walls had very obvious traces of man-made excavation. There were 12 relief sculptures carved into the stone walls in a very orderly manner. Each relief sculpture was the image of an animal from the 12 zodiac animals. However, the animals in the relief sculptures were huge and very human-like. Their faces were obviously angry, and they all opened their mouths to roar. What was even stranger was that they were holding something that looked like a weapon in their hands. What shocked me the most wasn't the 12 relief sculptures, but the giant blood-red sarcophagus in the middle of the cave. Since this place was called Chiyou's tomb, it wasn't strange to see a coffin here. Chiyu was a person from ancient myths and legends. No matter what kind of coffin it wouldn't surprise me. What shocked me the most wasn't the coffin itself, but the fact that I had seen this coffin before. Chapter 510. Over the years, I had seen countless strange and extraordinary Taoist techniques, such as the Yang God 3-talent sword formation of Mount Longhu, or the technique of sacrificing evil spirits to kill several heaven masters. However, what left the deepest impression on me was that before I had stepped onto the path of cultivation, the fatty's father had sacrificed his life to use the 9 lives of wrath. Even now, after I had the cultivation of a quasi-heaven master, I still couldn't see what kind of power was contained in the 9 lives of wrath. This wasn't to say that the power contained in the technique was very strong. In reality, the Rakshasa that Li Ying's corpse had nurtured was barely in the glory of consciousness realm. The attack from the coffin that the 9 lives of wrath drew out didn't even kill her, so the power wasn't very strong. The reason I couldn't see through it was that the power wasn't Taoist Qi, nor was it Shaman Qi. However, it was extremely vast and had an ancient and wild aura. Because of the deep impression, I could still clearly remember the appearance of the coffin that fell from the sky. It was exactly the same as the huge blood-red stone coffin in front of me, regardless of its size or shape. Even the ancient and wild aura it gave me was exactly the same. There was no doubt about it. What was the relationship between the fatty's father, Lin Aching, and the stone coffin in front of me? What did it have to do with Chiyou's tomb or Chiyu? All along, I had thought that fatty's father had come back to life after that incident, and that was why he was involved with the Fire God Temple, Swanee, and a series of other things. However, from the looks of this stone coffin, I'm afraid that even earlier, fatty's father and even all of their ancestors who ate Swanee's food had long been involved in this matter. Back then, Lin Aching had used the 9 lives of wrath. It wasn't a coincidence, but everything had been predestined. Thinking deeper, as Lin Aching's son, how could the fatty be involved in all of this? He had called me to the grave in the mountain behind the junior high school, and I had drunk that cup of wine. Everything had been predestined. I stared at the stone coffin in a daze. Behind me, Yao Yao had just entered and accidentally bumped into me, waking me up. I turned to look at Liang Tianxin. I wanted to ask him what his next step was, but before I could open my mouth, I saw a strange expression on Liang Tianxin's face. It seemed to be excitement, but it also seemed to be fear. His eyes were fixed on the sarcophagus, and his mouth was opening and closing as if he was mumbling something. Judging from the shape of his mouth, he seemed to be repeating something. "It's here. It's here." I turned to look at Xiao Sigui's face, and he was doing the same thing. I didn't need to ask to know that the two of them had been looking for this place. After a long while, the two of them came back to their senses. Liang Tianxin took a deep breath and seemed to stabilize his emotions. He pointed at the huge stone coffin in front of him and said, "Inside this stone coffin is Chiyo's Jianhou. The front of this stone coffin is carved with a green ox, and the back is carved with a heavenly bird. Under the foot of the heavenly bird is a stone door. Open the stone door, and you can enter the coffin." He seemed to be talking to himself. Then he walked to the back of the coffin. Xiao Sigui followed closely behind. Yao Yao and I looked at each other and followed him. Although Yao Yao was scared, she had no other choice but to follow. The blood-red stone coffin was huge, more than 20 meters long. After walking half a circle, we came to the back of the stone coffin and looked up. It was just as Liang Tianxin had said. The back of the stone coffin was carved with a heavenly bird. I couldn't tell what kind of heavenly bird it was, but it looked like an eagle with a pair of huge wings spread out. It looked like an angel from Western mythology. Besides me, no one paid attention to the heavenly bird. Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigui were looking at an obvious stone door at the foot of the heavenly bird. Just like the second door, this hidden stone door was also open. There was a faint red light coming from inside, and it clearly carried a dangerous aura. Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigui stopped and discussed with each other. "That's all in the book. It says that Chiyo's inheritance and that thing are inside. There's always great danger next to the treasure." "Hunchback, what do you think?" Liang Tianxin asked. "Haha." Xiao Sigui chuckled. His expression was clearly not as solemn as Liang Tianxin's. After laughing, he said nonchalantly, "You and I came here to seek fortune, so how can we not take risks? Let's go in now. Whether we live or die depends on our luck." Xiao Sigui was open-minded, but Liang Tianxin was obviously a person who cherished his life. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "It's okay to take risks, but we can't take unnecessary risks. In my opinion, it's better to let Zhou Yi go in first to see what's going on. We could just follow behind him." Now that we had reached our final destination, I was probably of no use to Liang Tianxin and the others. He didn't hide his words at all. Xiao Sigui disagreed. He shook his head and said, "It's meaningless to let him explore the way. If it's dangerous inside, he won't be able to come out. If it's not dangerous, I think he won't come out even if he goes in. What's the point? What's more, this door is open. The people who came in earlier have obviously gone in now. They can find this place and open several doors. Obviously, they know this place like the back of their hand. Old man, we can't hesitate anymore. We've planned for so long. We can't let others beat us to it." Hearing Xiao Sigui's words, Liang Tianxin finally made up his mind. He gritted his teeth and nodded. "Okay, let's go in." After saying that, he didn't forget Yao Yao and me. He turned around and called us over before going through the stone door together. This time, Yao Yao and I were still walking in the middle, but Liang Tianxin was at the back and Xiao Sigui was at the front. But just as Xiao Sigui was about to step through the stone door, a black shadow flashed in front of us. It was a person who walked out of the stone door. This sudden change shocked everyone. Xiao Sigui retreated quickly. Liang Tianxin instantly took out his artifact and stared at the person in front of him. I was also shocked. While shielding Yao Yao behind me, I mobilized my Taoist energy and was ready to take out the Xianyuan sword case at any time. The black shadow that came out of the stone door also noticed us. In shock, he let out a soft cry. As soon as he appeared, he quickly shrank back into the stone door. Only a pair of blurry eyes could be seen, looking at us with vigilance. When I heard his voice, I felt that it was familiar. I looked carefully. Who else could it be but the fatty? The person who came in earlier was the fatty? The last time I separated from the fatty was when the people from Mount Longhu tricked me. At that time, Lin Aching took the fatty to escape. The father and son were together. Combining this stone coffin and my speculation, the person who came in earlier was most likely the fatty and his son. While I was thinking, the fatty also noticed me. His body, which was hidden behind the stone door, peeked out and asked me in surprise, "Zhou Yi, is that you? Why are you here as well?" Although I was in front of Liang Tianxin and his son, I didn't take them seriously. I walked to the fatty's side and pointed at Liang Tianxin and his son. I said with a smile, "It's these two Hong Kong heavenly masters who brought me here. As for you, why are you here? Did you come with Uncle Lin?" Hearing that Liang Tianxin and his son were heavenly masters, the fatty's expression changed. However, since I didn't know if they were friend or foe, he didn't say anything. He just nodded at me and said in a low voice, "I came with my father. My father just entered and told me to wait outside for his news. Let's not talk about me first. What's going on with these two heavenly masters?" I shook my head. What else could it be? Since you can come here, you must be borrowing a small cauldron filled with witchcraft energy. I cultivate witchcraft energy, and these two heavenly masters want to come here. They're obviously forcing me to lead the way for them. The fatty's expression changed again. He said anxiously, "What should we do? There's still no news of my father, and I'm not a match for a heavenly master." Just as I was about to tell him that it was okay, Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sige, who were behind me, reacted. Liang Tianxin said coldly, "I was wondering how could there be such a coincidence. Someone just had to come here before us. Zhou Yi, it was you who leaked the news and colluded with someone else." I still had a lot of questions to ask the fatty, so I didn't have the time to explain to him. I turned around and said coldly, "Fellow Liang, you need evidence to speak. It just happened to be someone I know. Besides, even if I leaked the news, so what?" Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue were shocked by my disdainful attitude. They were stunned for a moment before they said angrily, "You little bastard, do you think I don't dare to kill you? Now that the two of us are here, it's useless to keep you alive. Little bastard, I'll kill you now." It was obvious that Liang Tianxin had tolerated me for a long time. After his emotions exploded, he didn't care anymore. He raised the bone flute in his hand and was about to attack me. I didn't bother to feign civility with him anymore. I snorted coldly and was about to summon the snake spirit and tong tong. However, after a thought, my expression suddenly changed. Chapter 511. Over the past few days, the reason I wasn't afraid of Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sige, the two celestial masters, was because of the pupil and the serpent spirit. Both of them had celestial master cultivation, and together with me, it was a piece of cake for us to deal with the two celestial masters. But I didn't expect that I would be unable to contact them after entering Chiyo's tomb. What should I do? In an instant, my mind raced. Without the snake spirit and Tong Tong, I would definitely not be able to defeat the two of them alone. Yao Yao and Fatty wouldn't be able to help much either. For now, the only thing I could rely on was the Xianyuan sword. According to the previous test, I can use half of the Dao Qi in my body to activate the Xianyuan sword to shoot out a stream of sword Qi. The Xianyuan sword Qi was very powerful. It was impossible for Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue to dodge it. However, it was easy to injure them, but difficult to kill them. To kill them, 2 Xianyuan sword Qi was definitely not enough. Once I've used up the Xianyuan sword Qi twice, Liang Tianxin and the other two won't give me another chance. Liang Tianxin didn't rush to attack when he saw that my expression wasn't right. He smiled at me and asked mockingly, "What? Are you scared now? Don't you think it's too late? This old man has already endured for more than 2 years to avenge my son's death. If you had begged for mercy earlier, perhaps I could have let you die a little more quickly. But you little brat, you're ignorant and arrogant. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Today, this old man will definitely scrape your bones and search your soul. I'll let you taste the pain of having your soul scattered. He gritted his teeth as he spoke, but I didn't have time to care about him. I slowly came up with a countermeasure. With my current strength, I definitely won't be able to kill him, so I can't fight him head-on. My main goal is to protect myself, and I only need to make him hesitate in taking action. After thinking it through, I had an idea. I raised my head and stared at Liang Tianxin. The corners of my mouth curled up as I replied unhurriedly, "Fellow Taoist Liang, it was indeed my fault for killing your son, but he was the one who tried to kill me first, and I had to protect myself. Let's not talk about this for now. This time, I came to Chio's tomb knowing that you were using me. So why did I still dare to come with you? Do you really think that I don't have a way to protect myself? If you want to kill me, you'll have to see if you have the ability to." After saying that, I reached into my bosom, and the simple and unadorned Xinyuan sword case appeared in my hand. I quickly transferred my Dao Qi into it. Just as I had expected, Liang Tianxin had always been a schemer. To put it nicely, he was a shrewd person who planned things out before taking action. To put it bluntly, he was a coward who did not act decisively. After hearing my confident words, the anger on his face dissipated a lot. When he saw the Xinyuan sword box in my hand, his expression became even more solemn. He furrowed his brows and stared at the Xinyuan sword box, as though he could feel the vast and majestic aura from it. While Liang Tianxin was hesitating, I didn't hesitate anymore. After injecting my qi into the sword case, I saw the case move slightly. I quickly turned the case upside down and pointed the opening straight at Liang Tianxin. In the blink of an eye, a speck of starlight shot out of the scabbard. It was so fast that it only left a series of afterimages in the air. In the next second, it arrived in front of Liang Tianxin. This time, Liang Tianxin's expression changed completely. He waved the bone flute in his hand, and a thick black screen appeared out of thin air in front of him in an attempt to block the sword light. However, the Xinyuan sword was an ancient divine artifact. Even though only a trace of sword qi leaked out, how could Liang Tianxin's cultivation block it? When the starlight reached the black screen in front of Liang Tianxin, it was not obstructed at all. It passed through it without any hindrance and continued shooting straight at Liang Tianxin. This time, not only did Liang Tianxin's expression change greatly, but Xiao Sigui's eyes also widened abruptly, and he quickly uttered a spell. He reached out and pointed at the sword light, saying solemnly, "Condense." At the same time, Liang Tianxin suddenly spat out a mouthful of black blood. The black blood carried a strong, murderous aura, and one could vaguely see that it was wrapped in something that looked like a black and red seal. He had even used the Celestial Master Seal. This was obviously Liang Tianxin's life-saving ability. Xiao Sigui's spell arrived in an instant. The spell used by a Celestial Master Realm Cultivator was far more powerful than mine. The air around the starlight became visibly viscous, and it tightly wrapped around the starlight. If I had been in the middle of it, I'm afraid that the condensed spell would have broken my bones and torn my tendons. However, the sword light was illusory and extremely sharp. Its speed only slowed down slightly before it pierced through the shackles around it and continued to rush forward. At this time, Liang Tianxin's Celestial Master Seal, which was wrapped in black blood, had also arrived in front of the starlight. I didn't know what the black blood was, but after it wrapped around the starlight, its effect was even stronger than Xiao Sigui's condensed spell. The starlight wrapped in the black blood seemed to have fallen into a quagmire, and its speed had obviously decreased significantly. At this time, Liang Tianxin's Celestial Master Seal collided with the starlight. There was a flash of blood-red light, and the starlight disappeared in a sea of blood. However, the starlight didn't vanish directly, and the two fell into a stalemate. At the same time, Xiao Sigue also took out his celestial master seal and did almost the same thing as Liang Tianxin. In the air, a corpse character completely formed by eerie black gas appeared. This corpse character was very complete, and its power seemed to be greater than Liang Tianxin's ghost character. After it pressed down, it directly smashed the starlight, causing it to scatter and disappear. After using the celestial master seal twice in a row, Liang Tianxin's face turned pale. He panted slightly, and when he looked at me again, he no longer had the sneer from before. At this moment, the Taoist Qi in my body had been used up. Although I kept absorbing the true dragon Qi from the Jade bracelet, I definitely couldn't use the Xin Yuan sword Qi for a while. Fortunately, I cultivated both Taoist Qi and Witch Qi. If I only cultivated Taoist Qi, I would inevitably show weakness on the surface when the Taoist Qi in my body was exhausted. However, I had the support of Witch Qi, so I didn't look like someone who was exhausted on the surface. I looked up and was still smiling at Liang Tianxin. I said lightly, "How many times do you think I can use it now, fellow Taoist Liang? Do you want to try again? Besides, the Qingzhou cauldron is still with me. As long as I absorb some of the Witch Qi in the cauldron, fellow Taoist Liang won't be able to get out of here, even if you snatch the Qingzhou cauldron back. Of course, the Qingzhou cauldron might be useful in the interior of this giant coffin. If you don't have the Qingzhou cauldron filled with Witch Qi, how are you going to break in?" Chapter 512. With the direct threat of the Xin Yuan sword Qi and the hidden threat of the Qingzhou cauldron, Liang Tianxin's gloomy mind, I thought it would be easy to intimidate him. However, after hearing my words, Liang Tianxin's expression became even more furious. He glared at me fiercely, like a hungry wolf choosing its prey. It seemed that he was determined to attack me regardless of the threat. Just when I was scared by his gaze, Xiao Sigei, who was standing next to him, took a step forward and blocked Liang Tianxin. He advised him in a deep voice, "Old man, the bigger picture is the most important thing. After we get out of here, I will definitely help you kill this boy, but now is not the time." Liang Tianxin suddenly laughed. "The bigger picture? Hunchback, do you really think that I don't know the bigger picture? This old man must kill this kid for the sake of the big picture. This boy's background is not simple. He is not tolerated by the whole metaphysics world, but he has survived until now. He must have extraordinary means and many conspiracies. On the surface, it seems that he was forced to come to Chiyo's tomb. But look at the situation now. Someone came in before us, and it's his acquaintance. Although we can't be sure that he leaked the information, there must be something fishy behind it. We have been planning for Chiyo's tomb for decades. What we're most afraid of now is variables, and this boy is the biggest variable. On the other hand, according to the situation of the two doors just now, we only need the Qingzhou cauldron to enter Chiyo's tomb. This boy is useless to us." Liang Tianxin seemed angry, but his words were very calm. After listening to him, Xiao Sigue frowned and thought for a moment, but he still shook his head. "What you said makes sense, but the two sword Qi he used just now were extremely extraordinary. We had to use the celestial master seal together to block it. If he uses it twice more, I'm not even sure if I can block it, let alone kill him." "Huh?" Liang Tianxin laughed. "Hunchback, you are fooled by this boy. If he can use it twice more, do you think he will easily call a truce with us? Even if he can use it twice more, we have to kill him immediately. Otherwise, when he recovers, it will be even more difficult for us to kill him. Moreover, he's still young. If we allow him to leave this time, then he'll surely come back to kill us one day. So this kid absolutely can't be allowed to live." Without waiting for Xiao Sigue to question him again, Liang Tianxin continued, "As for the Qingzhou cauldron, Hunchback, don't forget that my Taoist magic specializes in studying dead people. As long as we kill this brat, I have 10,000 ways to inject his sorcerer Qi back into the cauldron before it dissipates." After listening to Liang Tianxin, my heart sank little by little. I originally thought that Liang Tianxin only wanted to kill me out of rage, but I never imagined that he had already planned everything before making a move. He had already thought through everything before deciding to make a move. From this point of view, my idea of deterring him from making a move was just a pipe dream. I gritted my teeth and didn't say anything. I seized every second to crazily absorb the true dragon energy from the jade bracelet. If he wanted to live, he could only risk his life. Just as I was crazily absorbing the dragon energy, Qiao Sigue was finally convinced. He nodded and shifted his gaze to me. He said coldly, "Old ghost, you're right. Let's do it." After the two of them made their decision, they didn't hesitate at all. Their first move was a killing move. Regardless of the damage to the Celestial Master seals, they used their seals again. One on the left and one on the right, they besieged me. At this moment, the fatty suddenly came to my side and asked anxiously, "Third baby, what should we do?" The fatty's strength wasn't enough. At the moment, he was only at the glory of knowledge realm, so he couldn't help at all. I quickly pushed him aside and asked Yao Yao, who was about to come over to help, to stay aside as well. Then, I hurriedly raised my eyes and stared at the two Celestial Master seals that were rapidly attacking me. Then, I placed my hands on the Xinyuan sword case. At this moment, the Taoist energy in my body hadn't even recovered by a quarter, so I couldn't activate the Xinyuan sword case at all. However, if I used the Jade Blood Talisman secret technique, I could instantly replenish the Taoist energy in my body at the cost of 10 years of my lifespan. Then, I could use the Xinyuan sword case twice. Compared to my life, 10 years of lifespan was really nothing. At this moment, I couldn't care so much. Just as I was chanting the Jade Blood Talisman secret technique, a soft exclamation came from the stone door of the coffin behind me. Didn't I say that there's only one person outside? Why are there so many of them all of a sudden? Following the voice, an old man who looked to be in his 50s walked out from the stone door. He raised his head and looked at the two Celestial Master seals that were attacking me. With a wave of his hand, a strong wind blew out and blocked the seals. Then, the person looked at Liang Tianxin and Qiao Sigue and snorted coldly. "This is the entrance of the blood coffin. What if you use the Celestial Master seals at will and attract the blood spirit guards here? What nonsense!" This person's sudden attack not only saved me, but also changed the situation abruptly. Everyone turned to look at him. Liang Tianxin was the first to react. His expression suddenly became very ugly as he said with difficulty, "Young God Celestial Master." Then, he turned to look at me. His eyes were filled with vigilance and regret. It was obvious that he thought that I had attracted this person here. I was dumbfounded. I had thought that there were only the fat man and his son in the stone coffin. Who knew that a young God Celestial Master would appear out of nowhere? I turned to look at the fat man. His expression was no less confused than mine. It was obvious that he didn't know the background of this old man. No one made a sound. The old man looked around and waved his hand. "All right, no matter who you are, since you're here, don't think about leaving. Follow me in." With that, he went back into the stone door. We hesitated for a while, but still followed him in. This old man was a young God Celestial Master. We didn't have the capital to resist his orders. No one even dared to try to escape. I brought Yao Yao and the fat man to walk in front, while Liang Tianxin and Qiao Sigue followed behind us. After entering, I looked up. The space inside the stone coffin was much larger than it looked from the outside. The entire space was filled with a red mist. It was so hazy that I couldn't see far. The old man seemed to be very familiar with the inside. After entering, he walked in a certain direction. I quietly asked the fat man. He told me that he and his father had just entered this place. Because they didn't know the situation inside the stone coffin, his father had gone in to explore and asked him to wait outside. He didn't know that there were other people inside, nor did he know the old man's identity. After I asked, he also asked me a question. However, he didn't ask me why I had come here. Instead, he asked me what the sword box I had just taken out was. I hadn't put away the Xinyuan sword box yet. After hearing his question, I picked it up and showed it to him. I asked him, "Is it this?" Unexpectedly, the fat man quickly turned his head to the side and covered his eyes. Don't show it to me. You know that my eyes are different from ordinary people. I have the ability to perform divination. Usually, when I see something with strong energy, my eyes will feel a stinging pain. In the past, when I took a look at our sect's inherited magic tool, my eyes hurt so much that I couldn't stop crying for a few days. But just now, I only glanced at that sword case of yours and quickly dodged it. But even now, I'm still trembling in fear. I have a feeling that if I look at it one more time, I'm afraid my eyes will go blind. Third baby, what is this thing? It's far more terrifying than the inherited magic tool of my sect. The fat man's sect's inherited magic tool. I had heard him mention it once before. It was the magic tool that Li Chunfeng and Yuan Tiangang used to derive the pushback diagram. It should be extraordinary, but compared to the Xianyuan sword, it paled in comparison. However, the Xianyuan sword was too famous, so I couldn't tell the fat man about it. I could only say that it was a magic tool that someone had given me. I wasn't too sure myself. The fat man gave up and didn't ask more. However, he still urged me to put it away. While talking, we walked dozens of meters into the stone coffin. The red mist around us seemed to thicken, but we could see the surroundings more clearly. We were walking toward a short, red mountain. On our right was a vast maple forest. However, it was the same color as the main color of this place. The maple forest was completely red. It was a blood maple forest. According to the legends, after Chiyu was killed by the emperor, his blood had turned into a blood maple forest. Could it be here? While I was thinking, the old man with the cultivation base of the Yang God Celestial Master brought us to the foot of the short mountain. When we turned in the direction of the blood maple forest, we saw an empty space with 5 people standing there. One of them was Lin Aching. Among the other 4, there was a young man in his 20s who looked like a rich young master standing in the middle. The other 3 old men stood behind him, as if they were the servants of this rich young master. The Yang God Celestial Master who had brought us here walked over and stood with the other 3. He respectfully said to the young man, "Young master, there's more than one person outside. There are 5 people in total. I brought all of them here." Hearing how he addressed me, Liang Tianxin and the others' faces changed. The old man was the Yang God Celestial Master, but he had called the young man Young Master. What was the young man's identity? Chapter 513. As far as I know, in the world of metaphysics, the Yang God Celestial Master is already at the peak of cultivation. Other than Celestial Master Zhang of Longhu Mountain and Old President Li of the Metaphysics Association, the Celestial Master who has condensed the Yang God represents the strongest power in the world, whether it is the Metaphysics Association, the Taoism Association, or even Buddhism. Because I understood this, I felt that the scene in front of me was very absurd. The dignified Yang God, Celestial Master, actually called himself a servant. He called him Young Master. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed it. Even people like Celestial Master Zhang and the old president wouldn't treat Yang God, Celestial Master like that. It wasn't only because of Yang God Celestial Master status, but also because of the rarity of Yang God Celestial Masters. Even for a giant like the Metaphysics Association, there were only a few Yang God Celestial Masters. Who dared to treat them as servants? Who dared to treat them as servants? The more I thought about it, the more I felt that this rich young man was extremely terrifying. Either this person's cultivation was peerless, higher than Celestial Master Zhang and the old president, and he looked down on Yang God Celestial Master like an ant, or he had a huge force behind him that was far stronger than the Metaphysics Association and Mount Longhu. I was still okay, I was just shocked. Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigae, who were standing not far from me, looked as if they had eaten a fly. The 2 of them had secretly planned for many years for Chiyo's tomb. They had put in a lot of effort to finally get here, but they were now in such a predicament. With 4 Yang God Celestial Masters here, no matter what Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigae were planning, they wouldn't be able to get anything. The Yang God Celestial Master who had brought us and was reporting to the young man about what happened when he saw us. Seeing that no one was paying attention, I secretly activated the power of insight in the 9-star heavenly dipper and looked at the young man. I could tell at a glance that his cultivation was only at the complete glory of knowledge, the same as my current cultivation. This conclusion wasn't out of my expectations. After all, I could tell from his appearance that he couldn't be a reclusive old monster. This meant that there must be a terrifying force behind him. However, in the metaphysics world, I only knew of the Metaphysics Association and Mount Longhu. I didn't know the others. But for some reason, I recalled what Han Wan-Nan had told me before. At that time, I was impressed by the Han family's power, but he said that the Han family was just an ant in front of the real metaphysics families. Could this young man be one of the real metaphysics families that Han Wan-Nan had mentioned? While I was pondering, the young god celestial master who had brought me in earlier suddenly stopped talking. He frowned as he looked at me. Then, he pointed at me and said coldly, "You dare to peek at young master's cultivation? You're seeking death." As he spoke, my body seemed to be restrained by something. I couldn't move at all. Not only my limbs, but even my heart couldn't beat and my lungs couldn't breathe. I turned pale with fright. The power of clear insight was extremely secretive. In the past, I had peeked at many people's cultivation without being discovered. I never thought that I would be seen through this time. At that moment, I couldn't be bothered with the power of the Yang Shun Tian celestial master. I tried to resist, but I couldn't use any power. I stood on the spot, unable to even move my eyes. Just as I was about to suffocate, the young man turned and looked at me. He waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "Forget it. Outsiders don't know the rules. Alu, Shi, go ahead and take a look at Fu's situation." Yes. After hearing his orders, the Yang Shintian celestial master and the other celestial master beside him cupped their hands and accepted the order. Then they went around a short mountain and headed deeper into the blood maple forest. At that moment, the young man looked at me with interest. "Your cultivation hasn't reached the celestial master realm, right? To be able to fight against two celestial masters. There are geniuses outside. Interesting, interesting." As he said that, he waved at me and signaled for me to come to him. I didn't understand, but after hesitating for a while, I still walked over. When I came to him, the young man looked at me from head to toe. After looking at me, he looked slightly surprised and said, "You're actually a dual witchcraft cultivator. No wonder you're so powerful. However, dual witchcraft cultivators aren't tolerated by the heavens. You brat, you're quite impressive to be able to stand here in one piece." His words shocked me. The witchcraft aura in my body couldn't be sensed by anyone below the celestial master realm. Furthermore, I was currently using the 9-star heavenly dipper's concealing essence power to hide the witchcraft aura in my body. It wouldn't be a big deal if the Yang Shintian celestial master saw through it. However, the person in front of me only had a similar cultivation as me, but he could actually see through it. As I didn't understand the situation, I just nodded and didn't make a sound. I didn't speak, but the person seemed to be very talkative. He continued, "I've seen many people from the outside, but you're the most interesting one. You shouldn't be a nobody. What's your name?" From the person's words, it was obvious that he wanted to befriend me. However, at the same time, his tone carried a strong sense of disdain. It was as though he was a high and mighty immortal who wanted to befriend a mortal on a whim. He could treat the Yang Shantian celestial master as a servant. With his identity, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him an immortal. However, even so, his tone still made me very uncomfortable. Furthermore, this was the second time he used the word outside. It was as though this person came from a place that was isolated from the world. While I was guessing, I calmly said my name, Zhou-Yi. The person was stunned at first, but then he burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha, your name is really, really interesting. How did your parents think of giving you such a name?" He laughed happily, but my expression became even colder. I said faintly, "It's given by my parents. Why do you need to ask for the reason?" My coldness was already very obvious, but the person didn't seem to care. He laughed again and said, "There are 3 sages in the world. According to legend, The Zhou, he was created by the three sages, and you were created by your parents. Unborn. So, your parents named you Zhou. Doesn't that mean that they are sages? Ha ha. I furrow my eyebrows. This person was really ignorant. Although he was teasing me, he was extremely disrespectful to my parents. Not to mention me, anyone else would be angry. Lifting my head to look at him, I took a deep breath and temporarily suppressed my anger. I said stiffly, "To me, my parents are naturally sages." Seeing my gaze, the person seemed to finally feel my anger. However, he still didn't seem to care. He shook his head, as though he had lost interest in me. He turned to look at the fat man's father, Lin Aching. His face had already changed into a cold expression. He asked, "Didn't you say that there was only one person outside? Did you deliberately deceive me?" Lin Aching hurriedly shook his head and explained. From their conversation, I roughly understood that the fat man and his son were the ones who had rushed in before us. After arriving at the blood coffin, Lin Aching was worried that there was danger inside, so he left the fat man outside while he went in alone to investigate. In the end, he met the group of young god celestial masters and the young man. After he was controlled, he told the young man that he had left the fat man outside, so the young man sent a young god celestial master out. In the end, he happened to stop me and Liang Tianxin from fighting. After asking, the young man glanced at us, shook his head, and sighed. A group of ignorant people dared to covet the war god's relic. They are really ignorant and fearless. However, you are also lucky to have met me here. At least you can keep your lives. All right, I won't make things difficult for you. You can go back the way you came. The blood spirit guards in front aren't something you can handle. Blood spirit guards? The young god celestial master had mentioned them before. From what they said, it seemed that they were a type of guard in the blood coffin, and they were very dangerous. Without waiting for me to ask, Liang Tianxin, who was next to me, asked, "What are blood spirit guards?" The young man didn't mind his abrupt question. Just as he was about to answer, he seemed to suddenly hear movement in the distance. He turned to look at the depths of the blood maple forest, and the corners of his mouth rose into a smile. Chapter 514. As he spoke, the sound of blades clashing suddenly came from afar, attracting everyone's attention. I looked over and saw that the depths of the blood maple forest was shaking. I could vaguely see a few figures rushing towards us. Just a few seconds later, the two young god celestial masters that the young man had called Alu and she appeared first. The two of them were young god celestial masters, but at this moment, they were in such a sorry state that it was not an exaggeration to say that they were scared shitless. As soon as the two of them appeared, two blood-red lights followed closely behind them. I looked carefully and saw that each of the two blood-red lights was wrapped around a figure. This figure was not a real body, but a blood-red illusory light shadow. It was thin and strong, about 3 meters tall. It was holding a long blood-red blade in its hand, and its illusory face was expressionless. This should be the blood spirit guard that the young man had mentioned. The blood spirit guard's speed was much faster than the two young god celestial masters. The distance between the two of them was getting closer and closer. Under the pressure, the two young god celestial masters fled while using various Taoist techniques to greet the blood spirit guard behind them. The blood spirit guard only used the blood-red blade in its hand to block the many Taoist techniques, and its speed was not affected much. On the contrary, the two young god celestial masters continued to use Taoist techniques, and their speed was affected. Not only did the distance not increase, but it also decreased. Seeing that the blood spirit guard was about to catch up, the other two young god celestial masters who had stayed behind went forward. They did not use any other Taoist techniques, but directly released their yang spirits. Two yang spirits, half real and half illusory, jumped out from the top of their heads. These two yang spirits were similar to the yang spirits of the three Taoist priests from Mount Longhu that I had seen before. They each held a weapon in their hand. One of the yang spirits held a small palm leaf fan, while the other held a long ruler. They each rushed towards a blood spirit guard. Just as the two young spirits approached the blood spirit guard, the thick blood-red fog not far away from them suddenly converged and outlined two vague figures. From their silhouettes, it was obvious that they were blood spirit guards. Seeing that two new blood spirit guards were about to be formed, the celestial masters were not surprised. No one even looked in that direction. The two celestial masters who had escaped from the blood maple forest continued to run. The two celestial masters who had gone to meet them were already entangled with the two blood spirit guards. A young spirit waved the palm leaf fan in his hand and instantly set off a gale, rushing towards a blood spirit guard. The spirit guard kept waving the blood-red long blade in his hand, creating a gale that wrapped around his body and continued to charge. The other young spirit brandished a long ruler and directly fought with the blood spirit guard. After the weapons clashed, the two illusory weapons produced the sound of metal and stone. After being entangled by the two young spirits, the speed of the blood spirit guards dropped significantly, but at the same time, it was obvious that the two young spirits were no match for the blood spirit guards. After a moment of entanglement, they showed signs of defeat. The young spirit, who was waving the palm leaf fan, did not stop the blood spirit guards. Instead, it was blown back by the wind from the blood spirit guard's blood blades, causing it to lose its balance in the air. As for the other young spirit, his defeat was even more obvious. He could not use the long ruler in his hand to block the blood spirit guard attacks. From time to time, his body would be cut by the blood blade. Fortunately, the young spirit was also an illusory body, so it was not injured. However, the young spirit's body became much more illusory when the blood blade cut it, and it was even faintly stained with a trace of red. It was obviously very bad. Although they were in a difficult situation, they were still able to contain the blood spirit guards. The two celestial masters ran further and further away. When they were only 100 meters away from us, the blood spirit guards formed by the blood fog condensed. Their cold eyes turned to the two young spirits, and they waved their long blades and chased after them. At this time, the two young spirits finally broke away from the battle and quickly retreated. The young god speed was much faster than the previous two young god celestial masters. It instantly shook off the blood spirit guards that were fighting with each other and avoided the two blood spirit guards that were chasing after us. When it returned to our side, it happened to catch up with the two celestial masters that had just escaped. The four blood spirit guards were still chasing after us. It seemed that they would not stop until they killed these young spirit celestial masters. Seeing the fierce fighting power of the blood spirit guards, Liang Tianxin, Qiao Sige, and I were all shocked. When the blood spirit guards got closer, they couldn't help but want to run away. However, the strange thing was that after the few young god celestial masters fled here, they directly sat down cross-legged and turned a blind eye to the blood spirit guards that were about to catch up. Even a young man, who looked like a rich young master, stood there calmly and looked at the approaching blood spirit guards without a trace of fear. Cultivators were all smart people. When they saw their indifferent expressions, they knew what was going on. Although the shock on their faces didn't diminish, they didn't take a step back. As expected, when the four blood spirit guards got closer, they stopped at the edge of the short mountain at the same time. They placed their blood-red blades on the ground and stared at us coldly. Their feet seemed to be tied up by something invisible, and they didn't take another step forward. After a while, their blood-red bodies gradually became more illusory. They slowly turned into a thick blood-red mist and dissipated. After the blood spirit guards disappeared, the two young spirit celestial masters, Alu and Ashi, stood up and walked to the young man. After cupping their hands in greeting, they said, "Young master, Brother Fu can still hold on." He asked me to report to young master that he can't estimate how long it will take to defeat the blood spirit guards. He asked young master to wait for a few more days. The young man, who had a faint smile on his face, now looked slightly worried. He sighed and nodded. "You two should rest first." With that, he turned to look at us. "You've met the blood spirit guards. You can leave now." The fatty and I looked at each other and saw the intention to retreat in each other's eyes. I nodded at the fatty and turned to leave. At that moment, the young man called out to me, "Joe, you don't need to leave. Stay here for now." I furrowed my eyebrows, and after a moment of consideration, I stopped walking. Although I didn't know why he wanted me to stay, I understood that his words were an order. I didn't have the strength to resist this order and could only obey. After I stayed, Yao Yao naturally stayed as well. At the same time, Lin Aching, who had been silent, suddenly said to the fatty, "Huzi, you don't need to leave either. Come to my side." The fatty had already stopped when he saw me stop. When he heard Lin Aching's words, he naturally wouldn't refuse. He turned and walked to Lin Aching's side. Thus, only Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue were left. The two of them looked conflicted. They wanted to stay, but they were afraid of the blood spirit guards and the yang spirit celestial masters. However, they were unwilling to leave. They stood there for a long time without moving. "You don't want to leave?" The young man looked at them with interest. Then, he turned to the yang spirit celestial masters and ordered, if they don't want to go back, then send them forward. Yes. After the two yang spirit celestial masters received the order, they waved their sleeves and created a gust of wind. Before Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue could react, their bodies were swept up by the gust of wind and flew into the depths of the blood maple forest, disappearing without a trace. At the same time, the blood fog in the distance gathered again. Two blood spirit guards appeared from the blood fog and chased in the direction that Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue had disappeared. Due to the blood fog, I couldn't see the situation in the depths of the blood maple forest. However, it wasn't hard to guess the outcome of Liang Tianxin and Xiao Sigue. I turned to look at the young man and asked, "Why did you leave me behind?" He turned to look at me and didn't answer my question. Instead, he asked, "Which cauldron do you control?" I was stunned. Which cauldron? What did he mean? After hesitating for a while, I said, "The Qingzhou cauldron." After listening to me, the young man's face showed a hint of sadness. He turned to look at Lin Aching and then at me. He suddenly sighed. Chapter 515. 10 Heavenly Caves? 9 Cauldrons Clan? Several words that I had never heard of leaped from the man's mouth, but on second thought, I soon understood. The 9 Cauldrons Clan he mentioned should be the clan that kept the small cauldrons. I turned to look at the fat father and son, feeling very surprised. Recently, I had been searching for the whereabouts of the remaining small cauldrons. I hadn't expected that the fat father and son would have one. From a young man's words, I could tell that the so-called 9 Cauldrons clan wasn't ordinary. Lin Aching wasn't just a simple coroner in a remote village. As for the young man in front of me, I was even more shocked. The 10 heavenly caves were the heavenly caves recorded in the Taoist scriptures. They were part of the Taoist legendary immortal realm. According to what he said, could it be that he was from the immortal world? Although it sounded absurd, I looked at the 4 yang god celestial masters standing next to him. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was from the immortal world. Such a powerful clan was only one of the 9 Cauldrons clan, and they had a small cauldron. From this, it could be seen that these small cauldrons weren't ordinary. It was no wonder that I had the opportunity to find all the small cauldrons during the sacrificial ritual. From the Liang cauldron I had obtained in Meizhou to the Jizhou cauldron in the Shenzhen cellar case, the 4 small cauldrons of the Yin Corpse sect, and the 3 small cauldrons that had appeared this time, all of the 9 cauldrons had appeared. 7 of them are in my possession. Currently, I had only discovered that I could activate the Xianyuan sword box after filling it with shaman energy. Apart from that, the small cauldrons had other uses. It wasn't realistic for me to figure it out by myself. If there was a chance, I would think of a way to ask Lin Aching or this young man. As for why the fat father and son, as well as the Wang family member who had the Yuzhou cauldron, had come to Chio's tomb at the same time as us, I now had the answer. The Yuzhou cauldron had summoned the Wang family, so the Yinzhou cauldron must have summoned the fat father and son. As for me, although I wasn't summoned by the small cauldron, I speculated that the Yuzhou cauldron and the Yinzhou cauldron had sent out signals at the same time. It was very likely that I had filled the Qingzhou cauldron with shaman energy. He reached out and took out a small cauldron. Staring at the small cauldron with burning eyes, he said, the 9 cauldron clans are the same breath and branch. For thousands of years, we have existed to search for the person with the mandate of heaven. This time, when we came to Chio's tomb, the Yu province cauldron clearly sent out a message saying that the person with the mandate of heaven is about to appear and will bestow Chio's inheritance and Chio's treasure to our 9 cauldron clans. For thousands of years, the inheritance of the 9 cauldron clans has been severed. Among the remaining 3 branches, my Yu province branch is the strongest. But to be honest, in the competition between the 10 great paradises, my Wanwu grotto heaven used to be second to none. The day we have been waiting for has finally come. He spoke excitedly, but Lin Aching's expression didn't change. After he finished, he suddenly asked coldly, according to what I know, for thousands of years, the 9 cauldrons clan has been scattered. Not only have we been searching, but we have also been waiting for the sage to descend. The ancestral teachings say that the sage will descend at the side of the 9 cauldrons. The message from the cauldron means that the sage has descended. But where will the sage descend? Has the Wang family received any news? The young man shook his head. The sage will descend at the side of the 9 cauldrons. The ancestral teachings say so. However, the 9 cauldrons are scattered. No one can say for sure where the sage will descend. Our Wang family hasn't received any news from the sage. It shouldn't be where the sage will descend. What about you? With that said, he looked at Lin Aching and me. Lin Aching shook his head and didn't speak. I glanced at him and shook my head as well. Although I had 7 cauldrons with me, none of them belonged to me. The 9 cauldrons clan had nothing to do with me. I didn't know anything about the sage's descent or the ancestral teachings. Seeing that we all denied it, the young man nodded. The 9 cauldrons clan has 9 lineages. Although the other 6 lineages have lost their inheritance, the cauldrons won't disappear. The sage should be born at the other 6 cauldrons. Lin Aching shook his head. Everything has its own fate. The 9 cauldrons clan is the servant of the sage. The meaning of their existence is to welcome the sage's descent. Unless all of them perish, the sage will definitely descend at a place guarded by the clan. It's just that the sage's descent is not unusual. Perhaps it's happening right beside us, and we haven't discovered it yet. With that said, he suddenly turned to look at me. There was an indescribable emotion in his eyes. I was stunned by his gaze. Then, I recalled that I had lived near Lin Aching's house since I was young. Could he have mistaken me for the sage that they were waiting for? Thinking about it carefully, it was possible. Back then, the sacrificial evil spirit had also said that the 9 cauldrons were originally mine. I shook my head and smiled wryly. Previously, it was Monster Emperor Jun, Gao Xinshi, and now it's the sage. Anyway, there's no need to worry when there are too many lice. Let them think whatever they want. I didn't mind. The young man didn't mind either. He shook his head. How can we servants guess the actions of the sage? We only need to know that the sage has descended. Moreover, this time, the sage is going to bestow us with inheritance and treasures. It's highly likely that he will appear. We just need to welcome him respectfully. There's no need to make wild guesses. Lin Aching nodded and didn't pursue the matter further. The young man continued the previous topic. All 3 clans have a chance of obtaining the sage's reward. Everyone, don't worry. My Wang clan won't monopolize it just because we are stronger than the 2 of you. However, the 2 of you must remember that our 9 cauldrons clan is of the same breath and branch. We are bound together for good and bad. Hence, after the sage bestows the items, I hope that the 2 of your clans can follow me into the Wangwu Grotto Heaven and quickly cultivate and digest Chi Yu's inheritance. Then, I'll impart it to all the members of our 3 clans. What do you think? His words sounded dignified, but he didn't hide his intentions at all. One look was enough to see through him. The sage's reward couldn't be fought over. It depended on one's luck. However, no matter who obtained the inheritance, they would move into the Wang clan and would naturally become part of the Wang clan's strength. As for imparting it to all the members, it was a benefit for the Wang clan. If Lin Aching obtained it, Fatty would naturally obtain the inheritance since he was his only son. Imparting it to all the members actually meant imparting it to the Wang clan. However, Lin Aching and I didn't mind. We nodded and expressed our agreement. After settling this matter, the young man's expression became much more relaxed. His face revealed friendliness as he called for the few of us to sit beside him. He chuckled and said, "Since we have come to an agreement, let's think of a way to enter the depths of the blood coffin and attempt to obtain the inheritance." He knew much more about this place than us. We naturally expressed our agreement and listened to his arrangements. Next, the young man gave us a brief introduction of the situation. His name was Wang Can, and he was a member of the Wangwu Grotto Heaven, the head of the 10 great grotto heavens of Taoism. His father, Wang Qigong, had passed away 3 years ago. Since then, he had been the head of the Wang clan. Although the Wangwu Grotto Heaven was the head of the 10 great grotto heavens in name, the Wang clan had declined a long time ago. Its strength could only be considered average among the 10 great grotto heavens. After his father passed away, the Wang clan had no one to oversee it. Its strength was almost at the bottom, and it had been very difficult for the past few years. It wasn't until the shocking news from the Yuzhou cauldron that he saw the hope of the Wang clan's rise. As for the Qiyu tomb in front of us, he also introduced the situation. In the core of the blood coffin, there was a place of inheritance. The message from the Yuzhou cauldron was for us to go there. But in fact, as long as we walked to the short mountain, the blood mist in the air would condense into blood spirit guards and attack people. The blood spirit guards were very strong, and even the young god Heavenly Master wasn't their match. However, there was a rule to follow. The blood spirit guards would form the same number as the number of people who came in. Moreover, as long as the people left the short mountain, the blood spirit guards would disappear and no longer chase after them. Thus, although we hadn't found a way to break through this place, we hadn't suffered any casualties. After introducing the blood spirit guards, Wang Can invited us to discuss how to deal with the blood spirit guards. Of course, he didn't put me in his eyes. He just wanted to ask Lin Aching. Since he didn't ask me, I didn't want to bother him. I just sat there in silence, waiting to hear if Lin Aching had any good ideas. However, before Lin Aching could say anything, we heard the sound of stone door opening and closing behind us. We immediately stopped talking, and our eyes were filled with surprise and suspicion. It was obvious that someone had entered the blood coffin. Chapter 516. Hearing the noise outside, Wang Can immediately stopped talking. He gestured to the young god, celestial masters under him. They immediately got up, leaving Lu and Shi on guard. The other 2 young god celestial masters got up and went to the entrance of the blood coffin to check the situation. After they left, Wang Can said, "Someone else is coming. Maybe the 9 cauldrons have other inheritances. Please be patient." Lin Aching nodded and didn't say anything. I frowned slightly. The remaining 7 cauldrons were in my hands, so the person who came later couldn't be from the other branches of the 9 cauldrons. Only the small cauldrons could enter this place. How did the person who came later open the 3 stone doors and enter this place? Logically speaking, the Wang family was extremely powerful, even stronger than any of the forces in the metaphysics world that I knew. They should be able to control the situation. However, I didn't know why, but I felt an inexplicable fear in my heart. Cultivators always had a kind of heaven man perception. When something happened, they would have a kind of understanding in advance. This kind of understanding was similar to divination. They could sense the impact of certain events on themselves in advance. Of course, this kind of premonition didn't appear in all situations. It would only appear in the face of a major change. In theory, this was the case. But in fact, before the event happened, no one could tell to what extent the future would affect them. So, I just sat cross-legged and waited quietly. A few minutes later, the 2 young god celestial masters who went to investigate still didn't send back any news. However, Wang Can's face changed slightly. He said to the 2 young god slaves who stayed behind, "There's no news from Shou and Kai. Lu, go and check the situation. If there's any change, don't show up. Come back and report to me immediately. Shi, take out the signal and be ready to summon Fu back at any time. Yes. The two young god celestial masters immediately bowed and accepted the order. The young god celestial masters under Wang can had amazing cultivation and even more amazing loyalty. From the beginning to the end, they carried out Wang Can's orders meticulously. They didn't question him at all, just like machines. In addition, after listening to how Officer Wang addressed them, I found that the names of these young god celestial masters were fortune, longevity, happiness, and wealth. Normal people wouldn't have this kind of name. It was possible that the Wang family had raised these 5 people as servants. That was why they were so obedient. After receiving the order, Shi took out a conch-like thing, which should be the signal that Officer Wang had mentioned. As for Alu, he rushed to the door of the blood coffin with a serious face. After Alu left, Lin Aching turned to Officer Wang and asked, "Brother Wang, did something happen?" Wang shook his head. "I don't know for the time being, but Shou, Kai, and the others are all servants I'm used to using. They usually know their priorities. I sent them to scout out the situation, but they haven't returned after so long. They must have encountered something. However, Uncle Lin, you don't need to worry. Even if a ruthless character comes, you just need to call Fu back. With Fu here, everything will be fine." Oh, seeing that Officer Wang was so sure, Lin Aching asked curiously, "May I know what realm brother Fu's cultivation has reached?" Officer Wang smiled slightly. "Uncle Lin, you are in charge of the Yinzhou tripod and the leader of the 9 tripod clans. You don't need to be so polite to a servant. Just call him Fu. As for Fu's cultivation, he is probably at the profound success of the Yang spirit, and he is only 1 step away from advancing. To be honest, after my father Xiaju immortalized, my cultivation was not enough, and the whole Wang family was supported by Fu. In the Blessed Enclave, he can still be ranked, but in the outside world, I don't believe that anyone can be stronger than Fu. The profound success of the Yang spirit. He was only 1 step away from advancing his Yang spirit. Although these realms are too far away from me, I know their power very well. Over the years, the strongest person I've seen is only a young god celestial master. Among those people, no one dares to say that they have reached the profound success of a Yang spirit, and I've never heard of anyone who has reached the realm of advancing his Yang spirit. I think only the old president and celestial master Zhang of Longhu Mountain, who have never shown up, are at this level. It was no wonder that Wang Qin was so confident. Even I felt less frightened after hearing what he said. After comforting everyone, Officer Wang sighed again. It's a pity that the Wang family has declined, and only Fu is supporting us. At this time, he is fighting with the blood spirit guards in the depths of the blood maple forest. According to my speculation, since there are blood spirit guards guarding this place, there must be a way to pass. It is very likely that we can pass after defeating the blood spirit guards. According to the information Fu sent me, he is confident that he can defeat a blood spirit guard in 1 or 2 days. If we call him back, our efforts will be in vain, and we will have to start all over again. No wonder we haven't seen Fu since we've been here for a long time. As for the way Officer Wang said, it sounded reasonable. However, after thinking about it for a while, I still had some questions in my mind. I asked Officer Wang, if Fu defeats the blood spirit guards, will all of us pass, or will Fu be the only one who can pass? I hadn't said anything, so I suddenly asked. Officer Wang didn't mind. He shook his head and said, "I don't know, but it doesn't make a big difference. It would be best if all of us can pass. If only Fu can pass, it doesn't matter. After he passes, he can confirm the location of the exit and come back to help us. Although the blood spirit guards are living creatures, their thinking is much simpler than that of humans. There will be a way to pass." It turned out that he had already considered this problem, and it did sound somewhat feasible. I nodded. Just as I was about to ask, we heard some commotion from the entrance of the sarcophagus behind us. We turned to look and saw Alu running toward us. There was a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth, and he looked a little panicked. He didn't look good at all. Everyone was startled. When Alu approached us, Officer Wong hurried to ask for more details. However, before Alu could answer, a hoarse and shrill voice came from a distance. Interesting. There are so many people hiding here. Hearing the voice, we quickly turned around and saw a thin, stooped figure floating in the air not far away. The man was wearing a black robe and a strange iron mask. His facial features were hidden behind the mask, so I couldn't tell who he was. Seeing the man, Alu immediately put on a vigilant face. He didn't talk anymore and stared at the man. The yang spirit above his head jumped out. Obviously, he was extremely afraid of the man. Ashi also held the signal to his mouth and looked at Officer Wong, waiting for his final order. Alu, who was the last to go, was injured. It was easy to imagine the situation of Asho and Akai, who had gone before. Officer Wong quickly made a decision and nodded at Ashi. Then, Ashi blew the conch in his hand. I thought that this so-called signal was similar to a trumpet in the real world. If you blew it, you would hear a sound. However, after Ashi blew it for a long time, he didn't make any sound. I guess that this signal was also strange. I didn't know if the masked man didn't hear the sound of the conch or if he didn't care about it, but he ignored Ashi and slowly walked to us. His eyes swept over Yao Yao, Officer Wong, Lin Aching, and the others, and finally fell on me. It was hard to describe the man's eyes. He seemed to have just noticed me and stared at me. I couldn't see his eyes under the iron mask, but I could feel his monstrous hatred. It seemed that there was an irreconcilable hatred between us. I was confused and shocked at the same time. It was true that I had countless enemies, but the person who could hurt Alu was at least a Yang God Celestial Master. However, I couldn't remember which Yang God Celestial Master I had offended. At the same time, the fear in my heart became more and more obvious. At this moment, I was finally sure that my uneasiness came from the masked man in front of me. I have a strong feeling that this person will be my mortal enemy, whether it is now or in the future. While we were quietly watching, two people came from the entrance of the blood coffin. Each of them was carrying a person. They were Asho and Akai. However, when I used my insight power to check them, I found that they were just ordinary celestial masters. It seemed they were just the masked man's servants. The one who had subdued Asho and Akai should also be the masked man. After the two of them arrived, the masked man finally moved. His gaze didn't move away from me. Behind the mask, he spoke in a hoarse and unpleasant voice. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.